The January 22nd Lane Community College Board of Education retreat will now be called to order. Celia, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Kevin Alltucker.
Here.
Denise Diamond.
Here.
Austin Volnaghi.
Here.
Sophie Gibson.
Here.
Steve Mattel.
Here.
Zach Mulholland.
Here.
Julie Weisman.
Here.
We will be moving on to the land recognition. The land acknowledgement speaker for this meeting is Alicia Mendez. Alicia, will you please provide the recognition?
I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the January 22nd board retreat agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed, say nay. And it passes unanimously. Please note that the equity lens has been provided for the board's reference. And we will now be moving on to the retreat portion of the agenda. Vince Adams, Oregon School Board Association Board Development Specialist, will be facilitating the retreat. President Bolger, will you please introduce Vince?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Well, Vince is no stranger to the board, and so I want to introduce Vince Adams, who's been working with the board this entire year, it seems, on various topics. And tonight he's going to lead us through a retreat. Vince Adams.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. So first thing I want to do is a little technology. Should I throw my share again?
Can I say something while you're doing that?
Yeah, please do.
I'm on we're shorthanded and I'm on call.
Okay.
So if this phone vibrates, I need to take it and I'll walk, but that's what's going on. You don't have to worry about anything else. It hasn't rung all week, but who knows, it might just in the middle of this meeting.
Thank you.
Can I say something while we're pulling up the?
Yeah, please do.
I just wanted to commend our president, Stephanie Bulger. In her weekly report that comes out, I think it was today, maybe it was yesterday, I've lost track a little bit. She usually lists, or she always lists like the, meetings that she's had in the past week or that are coming up. The list this week was pretty heavy hitting, right? Stephanie met with superintendent from one of the local school districts, the president of OIT, the governor of our state, the mayor. There's a lane workforce partnership meeting. I assume it wasn't just Stephanie from LCC, other folks. There were probably, I can't think of all of them, but you get the point. And that is exactly the kind of outreach that we want and you to do on behalf of LCC. And I know you do that every week, but this week was particularly eye-opening in terms of the amount of it. And I'm assuming all of the kind of the good energy that flows back to LCC via reflected in the way that you present to us. So present LCC. So thank you for that. And also I read your keynote address at the MLK event on Monday, and it was just very well done. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate you and the work that you do on behalf of LCC.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. I tell you, the march was a cold walk, but it was worth it.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for filling the time with appreciation for your leader. That's wonderful. So it's great to finally, we've done some technical work together. I mean, we talked about meeting procedures and we're working on your president's evaluation, which is another technical thing. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight, but it's nice to turn our attention to not what the board is doing, but how. It's interesting. I was chatting with Kevin as we were getting started, and a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is not so much what we're supposed to be doing, but how we're supposed to go about our work. And so I'll be working out of a theoretical framework called balanced governance. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going. A little bit more about me, because we've been doing some pretty goal-oriented work up to now. So I'll take a little time to talk about how I got into this seat. I grew up out on the coast in Resesport, not very far from here. And when I was a sophomore in high school, my highest aspiration was to be a choker setter. That was probably 1986, 1985, around that time. we know how that story unfolded, at least with regards to the wood products industry. I graduated high school with 2.8 GPA, went off to the Navy, and got out of there, started a life working in emergency services. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I actually threw a perfectly good job managing a medical supply company to go back to school. Studied environmental science and ended up taking a hard left turn and studied public policy in my advanced degree, which kind of and about the same time, I got elected to the Corvallis School Board, and that's where I got the school board bug. So that's how I sit here. I'm sitting at this odd nexus of having this very diverse lived experience, doing a lot of different things, which has gifted me the ability to speak multiple language with, not literally, but speak with people from all different walks of life, and having multiple perspectives, which I think has been really a gift for me in doing my consulting work. I'm coming up on 5 years working with OSBA, on top of my 10 years tenure on the Corvallis board. So I'm at a point where I've put in the 10,000 hours of time for expertise. I feel pretty confident doing this work. And this talk, what we're going to go through tonight, I really enjoy this conversation and doing this with boards, because this is really transformational work. If you drink this Kool-Aid, it will make a difference in how you do your work and how you impact the people you serve. So let's dive in. So what's on the agenda? Well, we're going to talk, why the heck do we do this board thing? And what the heck should we be doing, or how we go about it? We're going to take a bunch of time. We have scenarios embedded throughout this. They're all kind of hypothetical, but they're all grounded in real examples. And so they've been recalibrated, for the college setting. So I'll be checking in with you on a few of them to see if they're really plausible. And then we're going to finish our time doing a formative process to get input from you in the development of an operating agreement. Okay. So what's not on the agenda is kind of the technical stuff like public meeting law, ethics and school finance policy processes, things like that, the nuts and bolts of board work. If you have specific questions about that, I'm happy to answer those, but that's not really the purpose of our work tonight. This is really about how we go about doing our work. Okay. Let's see. The next slide is, do you have any specific questions that you want me to address? Are there any burning questions that any members have? I'm stepping up because I need to grab a notepad. Well, what do you want to get out of tonight?
I'll speak. I would like to have you call it an operating agreement or a board agreement. I'd like to have buy-in from all the board members about how we're going to move forward and work together in terms of communication, confidentiality, and doing the work of the college.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Did you read our board operating agreement document?
I haven't.
Okay.
Oh, well.
I'll speak up here then. Austin, are you referring to which document are you referring to?
Mike Scott took a lot of pride in the board operating agreement that was created and is in board docs that was created during a previous retreat that they had. I don't have it in front of me, obviously, but there is a board operating document that's in board docs.
Yeah.
So my follow-on question is, did anybody else know there was an operating agreement? And does it?
I think it's come up during previous discussions and iterations of what our board goals are. And I don't remember when the last time that we formally approved it was.
Okay. And have you used it? Have you ever pulled that thing out and referred to it? This iteration of the board.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I read them. It's pretty basic stuff.
Yeah,
in terms of
often
the operating agreement.
we'll talk about operating agreements in much more detail once we get to that section. But it'll be good to use that as a reference point.
Mhm.
Of course, well, we'll talk about operating agreements, but it's good to know that there's an existing document.
I think that speaks to a question. Zach, did you want to jump in first?
Well, I think just recognizing that we have a relatively new board.
Yeah.
I think the majority of us have been here about a year, less than a year and a half, right around there. And so, I think part of this is developing that shared understanding of these things and having best practices that as we, have sort of reconstituted the board, that we want to, create these agreements together and revisit the ones from the past and update them as needed.
Yeah, we'll reconstitute the operating agreement. Heck yeah. All right.
I think also, Vince, is sort of how can those operating agreements be reinforced and referred to at every single meeting? Because I think given what you've seen right now, there's sort of some people remember the agreement, some people don't. And I recognize that the board members that come into 2 board meetings a month, but you're coming in from your lives. I live it every day, but you're coming in from your lives. And so how can we make those, an active part of our meetings?
Yeah, definitely have ideas on that too. Good conversation.
Absolutely. And this is just another point of information, I guess, which is, and President Bulger, you might, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I believe when we did the onboarding for 3 of our new board members, we actually went over those, I believe also in our onboarding process, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I wish Brett was here because he would have definitely known, but that's okay. But yeah, anyway, so it is something that I think we've seen before. And maybe there's just opportunities, and I agree with President Bulger on this, that there's opportunities to kind of implement it as a kind of like what we do with the equity lens. I don't know if you noticed, but in our agenda, we did the equity lens as a reference point, right? And we use that as we make decisions around policies, budgets, and the decisions that we make as a board. Who are the populations we're impacting? Which are the populations we're not considering, and so forth. And those are, I think, critical, not only to our strategic plan, which it's listed out in there as well, but also just in the culture and nature of our institution.
Julie.
I'm looking at board docs, I'm looking through policies. There is not I cannot find the document you were referring to at all. I remember that we talked about some loose document of some agreements. I remember something like that, but surely not an operating agreement. So I think that in the absence of all of this, that we all don't know, we don't have agreement. One of the worst things that can happen to an organization, in my opinion, is, well, that's not how we've always done it. We've always done it this way. And when you ask the collective, and there's only maybe one person who remembers or 2, the rest of the group clearly doesn't know. So I think we have to create a new one because I can't find a copy of it. And I don't think all of us know what's in it.
It
wasn't called operating agreement.
I'll bet a beverage of our choice that Celia can find it.
Yeah, I was going to ask if I might bring it up so that it's available when we come back to that later in the conversation. I think it was either at the summer retreat when we approved the board goals. I think I was part of the documents then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other specific outcomes or questions? Any burning questions you like me to address? So I should also say that prior to working at OSBA, I worked for the OSU Extension Service. And so I'm an extension guy. So this is a workshop. Feel free to stop me, ask questions. If I say something that upsets you, let's have that conversation. So, yeah. And if we need to stop or take a break, interrupt. This is an informal proceeding. This is not a typical board meeting. Okay. Got past that. Okay. Why'd you run for the board? Why did you do this to yourself? That's a joke. It's okay. You can laugh. And for those of you who have been doing this, some of you are really new, but those of you who've been doing this a little bit longer, the why you're doing this may have changed from when you first got on the board. I know for me, when I first ran, I wasn't really clear why the heck I was getting on the school board. And then my why definitely developed and changed as I did the work. So why did you run? Why are you here? Why are you doing this work?
Would anyone like to go first?
Yeah, that's not a rhetorical.
Sure, I'll go first. Good Lord.
I wasn't sure if it was a rhetorical.
It is not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin?
Thanks. I ran because our parents instilled in us this sense of, I don't care what your lot in life is, or what you do for a living, or where you live, but you have a responsibility to make your community better. And so this idea of service was something that we learned. I was going to say, coerced into us. There was a little coercion, as teenagers. We don't take really kindly to, public service or volunteering. But anyway, that was a family value, and so that was a primary reason. And then I was just coming off of a academic career, and I had a little time on my hands.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin.
Anyone else?
Oh, you all get to share. No, this is required sharing. You're in the deep end of the pool now.
I mean, I'll go ahead and jump in and just say that, I went to community college myself as a stepping stone before transferring to a four-year university. So I recognize the critical value that community colleges provide and wanted to ensure we are keeping that available for coming and future generations. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Steve?
I don't have that much different to say, but on my own behalf, like the folks who've already spoken, I believe in, service back to my community.
Yeah.
I've had previous board experience prior to, elected board experience prior to LCC and really enjoyed it and found that, or felt like I was good at it and had, developed some skills and ability to help. And I think community colleges, this one's no exception. This one is exceptional, but it is a part of a sort of a system that upholds the American dream. And I think that's really great. So it's sort of an honor to be part of the governing board to try to, move that, to keep that going. Yeah, there are lots of different ways to serve your community. This is the way I choose to serve mine. Some people, volunteer to be the baseball coach, for Little League. There's 100 ways, and more. And this is where I feel like I can add value.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start calling up people. Julie, you
Okay, there's,
want to start at that end instead?
yeah.
Awesome.
Over on my side? Yeah, so I at Oregon Community College Association, we have an executive director who actually did her PhD on this subject. And in my conversations with her about her thesis paper, it was really fascinating that one of the number one reasons was because someone asked me to, right? And that is, and I find that really fascinating because it tells me a little bit about not only my responsibility as a board member now, which is that, yes, I serve my community in this capacity here and now, but I also need to support the people behind me. And because this institution is going to be around past my experience as a board member and so forth. So I am here because others were here before me and I'm standing on their shoulders. And it's my responsibility to then pass it on to the next generation of leaders and make sure that they have a framework to work with and to make sure that they have the support systems they need to be successful, especially my generation and the generation after me.
Mhm.
Do you want to speak, Sophie?
Yeah, well, I'm just kidding.
They need you be here.
I'm just kidding.
Why'd you run for student government?
Why I ran for student, it's actually kind of what you said, Kevin. I also want to be a human service worker for the same reason, is that I feel like when you're part of a community, it is kind of like your obligation to put yourself in other people's shoes and to support people that might not always have the voice to advocate for what they need. And so not a lot of students know that they can have a voice. And so it's my hope that we can be able to give students that voice and that opportunity to speak out for themselves and for their families.
Yeah. Thanks, Julie.
All of the above. Let's see. Living in Florence, I was definitely asked and recruited. We need a voice from Florence. Please, please, please. And this is full circle for me, having been a community college professor for over 20 years. I'm very involved in labor. So those skill sets and background, kind of this is a full circle moment.
Yeah.
Of service to the community and being asked and wanting to represent an area that many people felt needed hands-on local representation. So although I was relatively new to the community, I got talked into it and said I'd do it. And here I am.
Well, I'm one of the people who got asked, so I'll put myself on that list. But, and I mean, I've been involved in politics my entire life because, I've been a natural leader my entire life and kind of learned that when I was in third grade because I raised my hand and asked a question. And when I left the room, all my friends and stuff said, thank God you asked that question. I wanted to too, but I was afraid to. And I just kept doing it and kept doing it as I got older. And so, it's the same thing. I'm asking the same types of questions. So, service, absolutely. Customer service is like in my DNA. I have amassed a lot of experience that, so when my friends ask me to run, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good fit. That's a really good fit. I went here. I love Lane Community College. I like education. In a different life, I would have loved to have been a teacher, so I like coaching. I like, mentoring. But mostly the reason I'm here on this board is because I have a lot of board experience and, board governance, supporting the president and supporting the institution and really understanding the process on board governance. I actually have been taught it for the last 7 years in a nonprofit clinic. So on board governance. So it's not necessarily an elected board like this, but it's still the same basic functionality. And so this is my way of giving back, and that's why I'm here.
Thanks for being here. Now that you've revealed that, I'm going to expect so much more from you. Hopefully there's some tidbits. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Why do you think I asked that question? Or do you want to hear my story? I'll tell my story really quick. So it was 2013. I was at the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition annual summit. It was about this time of the year. And I was living my life in the extension, had no conception that I would ever be a politician or elected or anything. It just was not part of my world. Remember, I was the kid that grew up in Reedsport and humble beginnings. And the chair of the board, this force of nature of a woman, her name is Ann Schuster. She ended up being a county commissioner in Benton County, came charging across the room after the event and started waggling her finger in my face saying, Vince Adams, you should be on the school board, and started giving me the pitch and recruiting me. And I was completely stunned. I was like, what is happening? And I begged for a week to think about it because I just didn't know what to do. And in that week, I reflected on how public education, and I would include my education at Southwestern Oregon Community College in this, because that is definitely relevant to this, how that impacted my ability to do the work that I was doing. Throughout my life has been, all the jobs that I've done have been related to service in some way, and how my public education had been transformational and had been so powerful in my life. and really came to tune with what a lot of you have said, how education can really is the great equalizer and really forms the bedrock of democracy, of our polity that we live in. And that was what kind of caught me up and got me to say yes. It was a lapse in judgment, but I mean, but
We all
the
have
rest
them.
is history. Yeah, I was recruited as well. Show of hands, how many were you recruited? Most, the majority. And a lot of people are. Why do you think I asked this question?
Partially to know the why.
Mm,
You need to know the why before the how.
yeah, why does the why matter?
Turns out we're all in it for the same thing for the most part.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were in it for the pay. Surprised when we got nothing. Not even a stipend, damn.
Yeah. So,
Thank you doesn't suffice. I say thank you a lot.
The water.
Yeah, I'm here for the sparkling water.
sparkling water.
You get dinner.
Yeah. The reality is that governing boards usually walk into their meetings, they chat a little bit, but they sit down, approve their agenda and do their business, and then they gavel out and go home. And that's it. They never see each other. And they do this over and over and over again, and they never connect with each other. And just as Austin said, they never get to know what their why is. The reality is what you're doing is a very human process. And each of you is showing up with passion and conviction to do the work, but we never give ourselves the time to have that conversation. It was also a diagnostic question because you talked about service and giving back and about the institution, but I didn't hear a lot of you talking about students. So, except for Sophie centered her old comments around that. That gives me a little pause. And I just want you to sit with that for a little bit, because that's going to be a theme that's going to come up over and over tonight. Why does the board matter? This is pre-pandemic. You can kind of tell because this beard is a lot more white now.
Thank you for letting me that. Yeah.
But why does the board matter? And more importantly, why does your board culture matter?
Awesome.
The board matters because we're elected here by the people to represent the people.
Sure.
We're making huge decisions that impact not only the people of the district that elected us here, but students, faculty, classified professionals. I would even say that many of the decisions that we make here also impact economics, workforce. I mean, we fund a small business development center, so we're actually literally the engine of entrepreneurship. Yeah, and we are one of the major suppliers of workforce within our community. Our students, they graduate from here, they stay here, they live here, buy homes here, and really build community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well
At least we
said.
hope they do.
What's that?
At least we hope they do.
It's actually really amazing when you look at the data. It's it's amazing how many of our graduates stay in this community. It's pretty extraordinary.
Really consequential. Thank you, Austin.
Mhm.
Yeah, Kevin.
I'd like to add an addendum to what Austin is saying, because I've heard it a lot. I believe I was elected to represent the interests of the college and protect the interests of the college.
Hmm.
So this is an interesting kind of nuance that we might want to explore.
Yeah.
Because, I've heard it from some board members. I represent the interests of the people. And I'm saying I represent the interests of the college.
Yeah.
And the institution is a public institution.
Yep.
But to the question of why the boards matter, I mean, the way it's structured is we're the final say. With regard to most, with regard to the budget, with regard to, the selection of our president and, most important policy decisions. At the end of the day, we have the final say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Someone's got to be accountable, right?
I
Yeah,
think,
Denise.
well, it's interesting this point Kevin brings up, because maybe it begs the question, many boards are appointed, and there's significant difference between appointed boards, right? Like on a state level or hospital boards or things like that, that have who's who and what's what on them, versus elected boards. And so when you go back to an elected board, and why does that dynamic matter? Because it does give connectivity to there's a reason why it's broken up both by zones in our case, but also all voting members of Lane County vote for everybody. So that when you look at that dynamic, I think it gives some real interesting insight, because it allows for, in a beautiful world, it allows for a very healthy democratic dialogue between the needs of various communities and interests in communities, and a significant, huge player in addressing those needs, workforce and education and opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, to me, I just think that's a very interesting piece, how this is set up.
Very well said, Denise. I really appreciate this conversation the board's having, because you're illustrating it's a spectrum of our role. On one end, you're talking about a delegate role where you're elected to represent the people who elected you, or maybe certain constituencies. On the other end, you have a trustee role, what Kevin was giving voice to. And where you are responsible for the students and staff of this organization, and you're entrusted with its vitality to take it into the future. Okay, and those interests may not always be in alignment. And increasingly, in education, we're finding that the delegate role and the trustee role are actually going in opposite directions. So if board work seems a little more difficult these days, that's because it is all over. And not just in education, but in local governments, city councils, your county commissions. Everybody's starting to feel the heat. And a lot of it is the political climate that we're in. But these delegate versus trustee roles pushing and pulling on each other as we try to do our work. Yeah, Austin.
Yeah, and what you say actually kind of ties in really well with why does board culture matter? And by the way, I was looking at the photo and I was like going, wait, that's overrepresentation of Corvallis. And I was like, oh, wait, that's the Corvallis. That is the Corvallis school board right there. Because I was looking at the faces here and I was just like going, oh, I know them, Corvallis. And then the second thing I thought was also, I know them, and I know them, and I know that they don't always agree.
Yeah.
And I know that they come from different backgrounds with different perspectives, and even ran against each other for a different public office. But we won't go there. But with that, the concept of, in regards to board culture, dissent and disagreement is not necessarily a bad thing in board culture.
Not at all.
And I worry that boards also kind of get caught up in that concept, and mainly because of the political climate that we're in. But I know those people. I know several people there, and I know that not all of them get along or agree or stuff like that. But you guys are there. You're there together, and you're there for the students. And you do some really good work. I've seen your board meetings, and you guys really do good work. And yeah, so just thank you for the image, because it reminded me of different aspects of board culture, and it draws a little bit off of what you were saying.
Good example of a board with really good board culture, but not really great infrastructure. So we could go. I could talk about that board all night.
I think that in my view, board governance, and I've said this before, you guys will hear me, but I'm going to say it again because I'll always say it, is that when you have an organization as big as this one, an institution as big as this one, our job is to actually govern through policy and strategic direction. Our job is not to get into the weeds. Our job is not to get into the business of what the president is managing. Our job is to try to have a conversation about strategic direction, create policies that would speak to directions we might want to go. And so I think that the trustee position that Kevin spoke to and the constituency, perspective are all the same. I mean, it's like the people that I'm going to talk to when I run are going to ask me about the condition of the institution. They're going to ask me about students. They're going to ask me about faculty. They're going to ask me about, the new buildings, how we're doing. They're going to ask all those questions and they're going to say, what are you doing about it? And so part of that is the job of making sure that the budget is good, that the institution is sustainable so that we can actually do these new programmings. So it isn't just a simple, I'm answering just for the people. It's like, well, sure, our constituency said X, I want this. But our job is to make sure that we actually have a sustainable system and an institution to make sure that that actually can happen and that we've done our due diligence to confirm that we are able to do it. So I think that it's a conglomeration of all of them, that's just our job. And the way we do that is we do policies and strategic direction, and we hand it off to the employee that we've hired to actually go and produce that result for the board and for the community.
Yeah, Julie, your experience shows here. I mean, so the delegate role versus trustee role, it really boards will go back and forth between the polls depending on what's going on with the board. Research on K-12 boards tells us that boards that tend to spend the preponderance of their time focusing on their trustee role, focusing on the needs of their students, tend to have better academic outcomes. Not very surprising, but there's certainly going to be times when you're going to need to hear from the electorate or certain special interests. I mean, times of crisis is when people fill the boardroom and we have torches and pitchforks and things like that. And we have to hear those voices. And so our attention shifts from that trustee role over to that delegate role so we can hear that and then process that and then shift our attention back towards that trustee role. Does that make sense? Well, I just was doing a check-in and then.
Oh, I was going to say it does make sense, but it is interesting when you were talking, Julie, what also came to mind is how clearly the connection is for a just ordinary citizen between a policy and a reality. So if I'm citizen X and I'm like, boy, it would be really, really great to have an automotive program. That is an up and coming field, hands-on, we're so short on that and everything. And then to respond, right, to say, we have to be fiscally sound. I mean, obviously we do, but citizen X, isn't gonna hear all the particulars of budget management and policies and things like that. They want to hear, maybe need to hear the connectivity between that and what you get to see that their kid or shows up in the community, in a very real way. Because otherwise it just sounds like kind of academic talk, and people don't necessarily like academic talk.
And maybe you're really talking about transparency, that we're going to be transparent. Yeah.
Can I just respond for a sec? I apologize if I made you think that I would have this be all academic-y and everything and like budgetly, physically. I mean, if someone came to me and said that, it's like, wow, it sounds like a great idea. Let me bring that back to the institution to see if we can do it. And
Right.
what is involved in all of that, right?
Right.
So, but we have to also be able to see, is that a sustainable program? What will we have to do it? I mean, we did a lot of due diligence to prove that the aerodynamic program or the nurses building or whatever, that's due diligence. policy, strategic direction. That's what I'm talking about.
Austin.
And I'm not mad, but just be careful with the use of like torch and pitchforks.
yeah,
It's very derogatory to people who come up to, it's a brave thing to come up to this mic for 3 minutes and speak to an elected body. And even when it is controversial issues and stuff like that, they're advocates. They're advocating for something that they are interested in. They're not an angry mob. They're not. Yeah. So again, I'm not mad. Just let's be careful with language.
Thanks for the feedback.
I appreciate you, brother.
Let's focus on this last question. Because I haven't heard what I need to hear on this. Why does word culture matter?
I haven't said anything yet on this one, these two questions, so I'll jump in and, I mean, I think just generally on why the board matters, which I think ties to the second question as well. We set the tone, and the expectations. And then the second part is that the buck stops with us, that at the end of the day, if the people that hire us, the people that vote us into office, if there's a problem, we're the people that they're going to hold accountable at the end of the day. There's no one above us that we can blame it on and say, well, the leader didn't do it right. So I think that, we have a responsibility to deliver, and that, that at the end of the day, if it doesn't get done, it's on us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for acknowledging the responsibility. We'll talk more about that. But tell me more about the tone piece, because that's what I was looking for. Or anybody else jump in.
I think one, a culture of respect, one that values the time and the energy that people put into the work, one that sets a tone of excellence and something that students can aspire to.
Mm-hmm.
I think also there's like a trickle down effect too. Like what we talk about here and the way we act here and things, the policies that get passed, when it affects like professors or faculty, then they feel some kind of way. And the students, we see that and we feel that in the climate of the college, So there definitely is like a trickle down of what happens in here.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for that. I want to keep us moving here. Tell me about your students. Who are they?
Traditional, non-traditional, meaning people that don't come directly from high school, individuals that have lost their jobs, individuals that are sick and tired of their jobs, want to transition into something. We have international students coming from, what is it now, 73 different countries.
That's cool.
Which is extraordinary. And it just makes me fall in love with this institution every time when I think of a classroom where there's an international student sitting next to a non-traditional student, sitting next to a tradesperson who's trying to change their career, sitting next to a traditional student, and they're working on a project together. And that is extraordinary to me. Our students come from various walks of life. Some of them can park their car in the parking lot. Some of them have to take the bus. Some of them bike here. They come from various backgrounds. Some of them have kids. Many of them have jobs. A higher number than I want are homeless, food insecure. Yeah, it's a blend of different cultures, socioeconomic backgrounds, and individuals that come and get an education to better their circumstances.
Chaos, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
How do you know?
I come on campus. I sometimes talk to the students to kind of get where their perspective is coming from. I advocate for the students on a statewide level, but also on a local level. And I ask questions.
Okay. Does the rest of the board know that? What is this news to you guys?
What?
How he described your student body.
No.
It's not news to me because I've been in a different community college for over 20 years, and that pretty much describes, I would add to it a wide range of learning styles, wide range of learning styles.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's, I don't know that it's significantly changed from our board members who came to LCC and our LCC alumni. I don't know that one would say that it's dramatically changed over the years, but what I am not a product of a community college. I actually didn't even really know much about community colleges, but when I stepped into it, I just found it incredible. I mean, given the opportunity to be a professor at a 4-year or a community college, I would choose a community college from especially this point of view. For me, it has been so enriching to be in a classroom as described by Austin, where a mom is coming back to school who's sitting next to a vet, who's sitting next to someone who just graduated from high school, and forming community in that classroom of shared experiences and just being able to work together is just so incredibly enriching. I just found it to be like, wow. It's total wow.
So how does the story of that diversity of student, because you have a diverse student body.
Mm.
I mean, I knew that because I went to a community college. I get it. I've been there. How does that story find its way into this boardroom?
Obviously, we have a student representative who sits here. In student government, they do a lot of outreach to their student population and they hear those stories and so forth. They develop reports to the board, and we obviously have a student body president report. During board comments, we allow for students to speak first. It's not necessarily a board policy, although we might want to consider that, but it's like a tradition essentially.
This year.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there's more ways, and I'd love to explore that. But those are kind of the key like inflows. Oh, and reports from the cabinet, of course, with various student success stories, the resources and programs that are going for students or assisting students and so forth. Those are kind of the three main avenues.
See Julie nodding. So board does get reports.
Yeah, the first reports groups that I read when I first came on board and was reading through them, I was shocked to discover that the student body was very similar to what it was in 1980 when I went and was in student government. I mean, the median age was 33. I mean, they weren't all matriculating to 4-year. They were doing vocational degrees then. I mean, it was like, but a very, very similar transition in the makeup, so it's a amazing institution that's lasted for a very long time that serves a population and continuing for our community. So.
Great. I'm not going to belabor it. Yeah, you already knew this. You already talked about this. These are prompt questions. Because let me tell you, not every board I talk to sails through this conversation easily. So clearly, I mean, Austin, you're spending time in classroom, but clearly the board is getting data. You have an image of what your student body looks like. How about this one? How many didn't graduate?
Sorry, I misread that. Sorry. Didn't graduate.
I don't know the number, but we get a report on it.
Okay.
We've talked about it.
We do get reports on it, and I think one of the focus points on it for community colleges has been certificate programs and pathways.
Yeah, when I say graduate, I mean, everybody, this is a really diverse student body with a lot of different goals. So their terminal credential is going to be really, really different. So, but using that term graduate as a kind of in a very broad term.
I think the data that gets my attention on it is numbers that start and then don't go on to the next term. Where do people fall off? Sometimes it's particular subject matters where people fall off. Sometimes it's the flow of things. if I remember right, Zach, you were instrumental in saying, let's get enrollment going so that they could enroll in, was it two consecutive term? Am I saying it right?
So it'll be a year. You can enroll you up to a year in advance in your classes. So you can say your whole class schedule up to a year in advance.
So you can really see it.
I mean, I think that one of the big things with the graduate, we don't actually know necessarily on that why question. I think because if someone drops off, maybe they transfer, in which case I think we're trying to get better relationships with our other, Oregon schools to say, did they transfer to you? Make sure that if they're, picking up the final credits they need at a 4-year to get that 2-year degree, that we're awarding that degree. But, if they re-enter the workforce, if they move, I think this is something we don't really have good data on of, why did you leave? Is it because you got a job or you entered another program or you're not doing anything now? I think it's something we don't actually know.
I agree. No, I just want to say I absolutely agree because absolutely. We can look up a number, but the why is, that really struck me actually, is that to answer, I don't know. And I would like to know because I want to know what are the policies? Where do I need to invest in our budget to remove those whys?
Steve, you had a comment?
Yeah, we know the answers to some of these questions, folks said. I don't know that we, as a group, that is, you maybe know or as focused as maybe I think perhaps we might want to be. And there's other questions that we get answers to in reports that I think are probably equally important about students that aren't reflected directly here. So there's more questions that, and I get that these weren't meant to be exclusive or whatever. There's others,
Right.
but I was just going to make the observation only that it's interesting listening to this piece of the conversation, this focus on students. There, to me anyways, it sounds like there's a lot of common interest. And while we focus to some extent on these, issues and set metrics and for the president and staff to work on, we get high centered on other things. And I think it would help us quite a bit to remind ourselves the way you are right now about where we have common interest and to see where, if we could refocus on places where we could be, where we have common values and common vision and the likelihood for productive outcomes and steer away to the extent that we can from areas where, that are more, not that they're more divisive, we have to visit those things anyways, but where we're less likely to make progress.
You've just revealed the punchline for this whole talk.
Oh, we can get out here early?
No.
All right.
No. So there's so many more really fun conversations to have. So there's a couple things embedded in here, and I mean, I'll confess this question is really calibrated for K-12. I mean, because they're totally beholden to the graduation rate. I asked this question in a particular way, though. I didn't ask what was your rate, success rate, or whatever it was, the rate at which I don't know if there's a rate that you use for tracking your terminal degrees.
We have I believe we track our fall to fall enrollment. So someone started in the fall, are they still enrolled the following fall? And it's not good. I think it's just over 50%, if I recall correctly. So, you basically have half your students that are on track to graduate in 2 years, if that's accurate.
Yeah. So that's more of a retention rate.
It is.
But I mean, so whatever your success metric is, I didn't frame it in terms of a rate. Why? I asked you how many. Why did I ask it that way?
To get a context between what 3% represents and what 400 does. I mean, that would be the only reason that I would ask how many.
Anybody else want to take a pass at it?
To humanize it.
That's it. That's what it's really about. Because when we express things as rates, of course, from a technical standpoint, we're suppressing information. But the reality is we're talking about humans that are enrolled in your school on an education journey. And for some reason, they didn't make it. Which leads us to the question, why? And so really thinking in terms of individuals, if you have an equity lens, and clearly, I mean, you have equity and social justice embedded throughout your documents. I mean, you're living and breathing this work. I get it. But this is where we have to really start asking hard questions and holding ourselves accountable. That can be uncomfortable. Yes.
Not to take away from your point, I take your point. But I think we want to be a little bit careful when we say that they didn't make it because, according to what our design, hey, you should have, done a 2-year degree and graduated and shown up at graduation. That might be what we want. That's not necessarily what they want. They may have left for any number of reasons, including they got what they needed and got a job. And from their perspective, they're successful. This is not, I get that you didn't mean any of that, but we should be careful to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, our exact whatever it is that we want for them is not always 100% in line with what they want, and that's part of our listening, journey. So
yeah, and this board determines what success looks like.
But that's also, I totally agree. And that's part of the why. Getting exit information, it tells a lot, right? Or can tell a lot as far as if there's a need, if there was, we used to use first alert type systems, is it because you got so far behind because it was a family issue and then you really think that you can't catch up, but you never had a conversation with a counselor or your professor or anything. And there are options, but you just didn't really know. So when we know more about what some of those potential barriers are, then we know more about, well, just, it's cool. I made a different decision and thank you very much. Or no, there was, some real barriers and I had no idea of the resources that were available, to help with that barrier. And I think that's a big thing. Students really, really knowing, because community colleges tend to have an incredible amount of resources for students, right? It's just, do the students know?
Austin.
No, what is it? Diesel mechanics? Those are the ones that we have difficulty getting them to finish their degree because they get the skills and they can get
And they're gone.
and they are ready to roll. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that's success.
Yeah. And on that topic.
We don't need to get.
No,
You guys can go down that rabbit hole later.
I wasn't trying to send us down a rabbit hole. At the end of the day, if we're here for the students, then I guess my only point is that we should then constantly be asking them, what's your goal? And how do we line ours to yours,
Yeah,
excellent.
And we're
point.
meant to be a nimble institution, which includes changing our structures, et cetera. I don't want to twist ourselves in a knot over the thing, but it's a small point.
Well, I mean,
Good point.
but the board should chew on that and have that conversation. And just don't do it with a consultant in the room because, I mean, do it for yourselves. I mean, that's awesome.
Truly.
You had something, Stephanie, and then.
Well, I'm going to change that. When I look at the questions, I think about sort of almost granularity. To what extent I'm absolutely impressed that the board has some responses to these questions and feels like they know. From my perspective, I would love for the board to ask deeper questions. What does race and ethnicity look like at Lane Community College? And so those are the kinds of questions I would love for the board to ask. But I'm incredibly impressed that the board feels like they know our students.
Do you slice your retention rate by race, ethnicity?
Yes, we do.
We get
Good job.
I think it's an
We get a
annual
report.
report at the board level. I'm sure the college is looking at it more closely than
Yeah.
the staff that is, or looking at it more closely.
Yeah, and this why? Because it's individual. As board members, we're never going to get to that level of granularity. We're up here at the system level, but we should be communicating the expectation that the cabinet and our, staff are at that level. Particularly our counseling staff should know our students, know their stories, and if they're not succeeding, why, or why they are succeeding. Whatever that is, Julie.
I just wanted to, in the spirit of reminding ourselves to tread lightly, is that survey, follow-up, exit interviews, the whys, the questions, is all voluntary. And so even my agency, where we want to get feedback, we want to be able to report back. That's the only way we get to make decisions is if we get data. But there's always a huge number of people who just do not want to participate in that survey data, right? They don't want to give that information out. They get to exercise their their autonomy and agency to not provide that information. So we're limited into the scope, and we're just hoping that the people that we did survey, that did give us, represents enough broad range of folks that we can extrapolate what that means. But I just want to remind us all that exit interviews and data is voluntary. And I'm the worst of the kind. You ask me to do a survey and I usually just go, no. But, but as I say that out loud, I realize I probably should participate more.
Okay, great slide.
Mm.
Okay. This is about what you believe. That should be every student learn. Come on, can every student show growth? We can believe in that. Nods. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How about this? Can they all succeed? Depending on what that is, I mean, but define broadly, and they're part of that. Yeah.
Self-defined, yeah.
This is and I know your answer to this, but I mean, we can't predict student outcomes by social factors.
Yeah.
That's a fact. Don't make me go get the data. Is that okay with this board?
No.
No, it should be a surprise every time. Yeah, but we're not there yet. And I know that you're using your data because you're slicing your data. What's acceptable? You have a retention rate of what? Something around 50%?
Well, it ties into the numbers, right? I mean, it's always about the numbers. So if they're not continuing on and we're not getting, the FTE on it, and it's a budget thing, right? So the number of students persisting has to balance out with what that costs us and what that means in dollars and cents. So there is a number in there, that it's like you can't afford to lose this many, and you have to increase enrollment by this much, and there has to be persistence by X.
So maybe
There's a formula.
persistence is determined. What percent of students not persisting is acceptable to this board?
In an ideal world, every student would reach their desired academic or job outcome. I think that's one of the things where, say, that percentage that stays into the second year can be misleading, is because if half of those students that left, well, if they entered the workforce successfully or they entered a 4-year institution successfully, well, they didn't graduate, but that still is success ostensibly for that student.
Sure.
So I think, restating the question is, what percentage of students not meeting their goals is acceptable, right? And for me, that's, I would like it to be very low, of a 5 or 10% out of, of students that don't reach their goals. I'm guessing it's higher than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I was like thinking very, very much in like, okay, are they going to make more money after they graduate and so forth? But I really appreciate what you said, Zach, in their academic goals. Maybe a student, there's the idea of success is that they learned something. And I started to even think about like our non-credit course takers. They're coming here to learn something. And they want to leave with more knowledge than they came in with, right? And so, it really I really appreciate this question, because it makes me think about not just the economics of our students, but also just, have they left with knowledge? Have they gained knowledge? Have they gained things that they want to learn? So,
But it has to be balanced with what that costs us.
absolutely.
I was just going to make the broad point that I work at a 4-year institution. I meant to say at the outset, so I have a lot of familiarity. The most 4-year institutions pride themselves essentially on their, one of their pride points is exclusivity. The percent that they turn away, you can frame it that way or admit. Community colleges pride themselves on their inclusivity. We take everybody. We meet everybody that wants to be here where they are, which is an incredible challenge that we set for ourselves, right? And so by doing so, right, we end up by having to create a very different kind of an institution and define success differently. We have to have more wraparound services than an exclusive four-year institution might have. We have fewer resources to do it with. It's, but I just want to say, and I think I'm sure that others agree that it's an incredible pride point that Lane Community College is an inclusive institution in its most basic, meaning. Anybody who wants to come here, our goal is basically to find a way to help them meet their goals.
Well said.
Very well said.
So what percent of them not reaching their goals is acceptable?
Well, you're gonna, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's kind of that's a rhetorical question. Of course, we want zero. Would we accept something less than, zero because whatever, the world is imperfect and all that? I'll accept something less than zero. Exactly what the number is going to be, I'll let you say first what you think it is, and then we can argue it down from there. But yeah, so I get that we want to
hear more perspectives.
Yeah.
Why are you looking at me?
Um,
What's
Pushing you. You want to hear the punchline or you want to go off the record?
I'll take going on the record.
Okay.
So I've been listening, and this idea, the conversation has kind of shifted from graduating to meeting students' goals to what is success for that particular person. And I'm kind of with Steve there. It's like, lower is a lower percentage is better in my mind than a higher percentage. But just thinking back on my own community college experience, if I had taken a survey after my first year, I would have been, my goals would have been, I could tee off golf balls in the back parking lot before class, So I'm struggling how to reconcile this question in my mind.
What framing it in terms of the students'
Yeah.
goals.
Right. And students' goals change. They're dynamic. They're fluid.
We can twist ourselves into a knot of sorts to say, well, we need to provide more wraparound services, just to pick a thing, right? Because we think that would increase or decrease the dropout rate, or however you might frame it. But that has implications for others. That ends up by raising costs, and by raising costs, you might cause some students to drop out for budgetary reasons. So it's a challenge. There's a balance. I'm okay if that we don't satisfy everybody. I don't think that's precisely our mandate. We are trying to be open and inclusive. We are trying to be affordable. We do have expectations of the students themselves. We're here to guide and support and help you. You have to do. We're not suggesting they weren't up to the challenge, but you have to do your part as well. So having said that, I guess I expect that we will have some hard choices to make that will result in something less than zero.
Sure.
It can't be zero. I mean, that's just not real. It's never real. It could be a private school. It could be one you created yourself. It's just not real. So to me, it's also important to look at the comparative data. I mean, if you have a lot of students graduating and then it dramatically falls off, or, you get significant, you got to look at how it's going and be able to account in some ways or another why you may have significant drops, i.e. COVID or some other thing. So it's about, improving. It's about improving and understanding in relationship, to the numbers. We're not going to meet all the student needs. There's going to be students who, come for I don't know, we used to have students who would come for a couple of English classes because they had to do that to go to cosmetology school, and we didn't offer cosmetology school, but they got their English classes and off to cosmetology school. So no, they didn't graduate, but they got something out of it. And some of those things are so intrinsic and everything. We won't ever be able to nail it down. I mean, I think it often goes back to the relationships that we have with students, and listening to them, and the faculty and counselors and staff that develop relationships so that they can speak to these narratives and say, and that I think, is important. But I personally don't ever think any school is going to, and I've worked in private schools and alternative schools all over the country, and you don't get to zero.
Go ahead. I'm
So-
going to say something. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
To be the chair right now. He's me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm moving.
I already lost my train of thought, so why don't you go ahead?
I think I'm piggybacking what Denise has said is essentially is that I don't even think that I would have the question of what percentage is acceptable. I don't even think I would look at it that way. I'd want to know in the comparative data, we get lots of reports, and I'm really pleased with how all of us on the board actually digest and read the reports. We're prepared for them. We have good questions to ask staff and they speak on them. And so we're all looking to see, and we're seeing the measure. And when we get the comparables and we see where we're at on retention or what's going on, somebody inevitably will say, what's going on here? And usually we'll get some trend data. Someone will say, well, here's what we noticed. I mean, we all know what happened in COVID. And so, and I know from my own workforce what happens with retention and what's kind of going on in the climate around us. And that causes some of that leaving, and quitting their job and moving on elsewhere. So it's kind of the same thing with schools. It's like there's things that we can notice. And I think the thing that we want to know is that there isn't something so friggin' alarming that we see on those reports that is putting student success, but the institutional success for those students at risk. Like something we're doing is not working if we're not capped, that we didn't grab hold and say, wait, what the hell? Somebody took their eye off the ball. So I think that it isn't so much a percentage as that we're paying attention to the trend and that we're catching ourselves when something is out of whack.
Yeah.
And so it can't be zero because we're not a high school, so which is measured on, and you're right, if I were a high school board, that number would be alarming if it was 25, 30% of students not graduating. The question would be, what can we do to change that? Not why are they, but what can we do to change that? And the question would be, is we would get answers.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
Thanks for indulging the question, because clearly the way it's constructed, it doesn't fit for a community college setting.
Before you give us the punchline,
Okay.
I would love to hear what Stephanie has to say about that.
Yeah.
What I'd have to say about
Percentage.
the question itself, one of the challenges in working with the board is how much information to give the board, and to help the institution actually address some of the things that we might want to do in terms of helping our students and more of them being successful. So it's one of the challenges. I think what I do like for the board to do is really what Julie said, is kind of look at overall trends, because you might recall that the plan that I inherited, the strategic plan, didn't have metrics in them. Now, there are some institutions where boards do get involved in sort of looking at metrics, seeing how we set metrics for whether it's graduation, we call them completions, or it's retention, persistence. So, and boards might hear that information. At our institution, I have not done that. So I've been very grateful to this board for not pushing me in that direction before I'm ready. before I'm ready to do that. But we will be doing that because the institution will be able to set those kinds of metrics around student success. That's what we call it. And then the board would start to be able to weigh in on that. So I don't know. That's not a good response to your question, Steve, but I think it's been challenging. And like I've said, I've been really, really grateful for the grace from this board until we can put some things in place that would allow me to answer some of these questions more directly.
Can you speak to the data collection component of that last question with regards to, we're trying to improve our retention rates, but that doesn't capture the whole picture. So I think there's been talk in the past of, tracking transfers. I don't think we would have access to whether or not someone becomes employed or increases their wages. But on the first part of enrollment at other 4 years in the state, is that something that we're starting to get data on?
We're starting to have conversations, for example, with the two R1s in the state to have kind of data sharing agreements, so that we're able to get information from them about this kind of thing. With our high schools, we have data that we are sharing with our high schools because our high schools, actually, our districts actually don't know who is coming to Lane, how many of their graduates are actually coming to Lane. And so we are starting
Their data on the other side.
on the other side. And so they should know that. And so, yes, I came in from a state that had a few more systems, not perfect by any means, but had a few more systems where we were able to share more easily that kind of data. So when you come into a new institution, it's about starting where the college is and then building relationships to be able to strengthen the data. I certainly would like, and I talk to the cabinet all the time about being more of a data-informed culture. And that would mean that the board would be more data informed, but would start to have a culture of its own where it would start being very, very comfortable asking about data in the college. Disaggregating the data by race, ethnicity, gender, income, parsing that in multiple ways. You see some very interesting things when you start doing that because you could see a trend that's moving up. When you start out disaggregating data, then you start seeing some very interesting things, and some things that could be very disturbing to a board that's really interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and having those as values. So I know that to be the case, and that's why, like I said, I'm incredibly grateful for the grace that I'm receiving as we put some things in place to be able to create more of a data-informed culture and then present that to the board.
Okay, so the punchline. Your president kind of was heading in that direction. So as the question is written, it's really calibrated for K-12 education because they have that terminal metric. And I often get pushback, is 4-year graduation rate the appropriate one? What about 5-year completers? What about GEDs? Is that success? And it's a little squishy, but not nearly as squishy as it is for all y'all, because you have a lot of diversity in your students and what success looks like for your students. So this is a really tough concept. That said, I'll tell you what the research says. Boards that accept some percentage of failure rate in their students govern fundamentally different than those who don't. This is really a normative question, what should be, rather than a positivist question. We know that in the United States, we do not adequately fund K-12 education, nor in Oregon do we adequately fund community colleges. You guys have been choked for decades. So there's no expectation that you're going to be able to fully meet the needs of your students. And anybody who thinks otherwise is delusional. Okay, so we know that you can't truly be successful, but does that mean that you should let go of that aspirational goal that each and every one of the students that walk onto this campus are going to find a way to success? If you believe otherwise, you will start making choices about, well, if 95% is good enough, and who are the 5% that you're going to let go? You start making choices like that. We can't do that. Not if we're really going to be committed to the success of each and every person, regardless of their conditions of birth. And so it's really a normative question. And it's one, I mean, I don't know that there's a good answer at the community college level, but, you know, in the sense of terminal, you know, some sort of data, a way to view this in terms of data or student metrics. Nevertheless, you should always be committed to the success of your students, because that'll inform the choices that you make. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think being committed to the success of students does not necessarily translate into 100%. I don't buy that. So I'm just saying, and I don't think that a board who the most important thing is being committed to success and to understanding what might be the barriers. I know in the community college where I was for 20 years, one of the trends was if the economy is good, enrollment is down. And if the economy is not good, you know, enrollment is up. So, you know, there are these factors, right, that are parallel, so to say, to everything, you know, that we're watching. So I do 100% commit and agree that being ever mindful of success in all its various forms and definitions. I mean, I know for a while there was a huge conversation, community colleges, about certificate programs. La, 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 we can't do certificate programs because somehow that diminishes, you know, the educational value of our 2-year degree, la, 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 la. And now, you know, it's a huge trend in trying to figure, not only in offering certificates, but also in figuring out the chunks of information in any given degree program that are available as pathways for students. And that has opened up a lot of opportunities because students can see that, you know, they can see I can do these things and be achieving. Anyway.
I was toying with the question you were asking about if the board had an expectation of every student who comes into this institution leaves with what they came for. If the board had that expectation, the board's questions might change. The questions you might ask. You'll ask questions about our ESL students. What do they want? Do you happen to know what they want? What kinds of experiences do they have here? Do you have a sense of how they are leaving the institution? We give you absolutely no data on our ESL students, on our adult basic education students who are getting GEDs. We give you absolutely no data on that I'm aware of. So your questions would change because it seems to me, just to me, that you would be thinking about our students in all of their diversity. And so you would ask questions about your questions would change.
Well, just reflecting on the conversation and how intensively over the last hour and plus, we've been talking about student success and, you know, and coming at it from different angles. This is probably the longest conversation that I can think of. I've been here, so I'm closing in on 4 years where we have focused on student success for that duration of time. I think that's true for the 3 or 4 years that I've been here. And it's refreshing, by the way, because we're not arguing. And if you pick almost any other topic, we would be, but here we're pretty united. And that's basically an underline to a comment I made earlier. We ought to do this more. I will admit, as I'm reflecting on it, like, okay, how am I part of the solution or the problem in terms of helping focus on student success? I think it's a mixed bag. I'm thinking I get overly focused on budget, which, you know, is like, okay, I feel like that's my job. And if the budget balances, well, then the president can, you know, focus on student success. But Stephanie was telling us, but if you asked other kinds of questions, that would be helpful. And so I'm just admitting to my own areas of where I could focus, and others may do as well. And then I'm reminded also that, as Stephanie says, the questions we ask have, and potentially, depending on the question, I suppose, but potentially have enormous value to Stephanie. They empower her to go ask the questions of her staff and the faculty. And that's one of them. I think it's a thing that we don't talk about that much, but sometimes just asking the question, even though Stephanie may not have the answer readily, she can then say at the next day at the cabinet meeting, I need to know this answer because Kevin or Austin or whoever asked it last night and 3 other board members clearly seemed interested. You all saw it. We need to get this answer, and it empowers her incredibly. So if we're focused on whatever it is that we're focused on, if we are focused on anything, gives her a lot of power to make those things priorities.
It also puts the budget into greater context as well. It's like, because what you spend your money on is what you care about. And so it really does put that in context as well.
I'm not sure what the next slide is.
Our students are adults, and some of them are going to sign up for more than they can take on. And some people make mistakes, and unfortunately, we give out Fs here. And sometimes people are not going to quite, it's not going to quite work out. And I think we need to recognize that and anyways, I might be digressing.
Yeah.
You have to, a degree is still earned. It's not bought.
Well, and if you fail a class, you might not get to make it up for free. There's costs associated with this, and unfortunately, it is a hard fact of life that we're not always going to succeed. And we might find that a degree program is not what is actually best for our life at that time. So, just giving people some grace as well, that it is hard to finish a community college degree, and it might not be that everyone succeeds and fall through the cracks. We can do our best to create a system where they're set up for success, but that doesn't guarantee it.
Yeah.
I'm going to borrow this question when I testify in front of the legislators, just FYI.
You're going to get the slide deck.
Yeah.
I don't know what's next. Oh, this is I'm going to talk at you for a while. Would the board like to take a break at this point? I do have a break planned, I think, at the end of this.
How
But
much longer for this?
oh my goodness, we are not going to get through the slide deck.
Um,
And this has been a great conversation. You have done exactly what I hoped.
I'm going
that
to
you
suggest
did.
we take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, that sounds
And that
great.
way we'll have an.
Yeah,
hour and a half
because
to
we've been
finish.
chatting and sitting and yeah.
Mhm.
And then I'll talk at you for a little bit and we'll get into some scenarios. And then I want to, by 8 o'clock, I really want to get into the operating agreement work. And then that's getting up, you'll be riding and getting up and moving, and it'll be a lot more fun.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll hold here.
Awesome.
Call the meeting back
Good.
to order. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at this and we need to update this because more research has been done. And I'm also noting that I'm a little fish out of water. I'm a school board guy at a community college. So this is research all centering around school boards and the behavior of school boards. So, prior to right into the 1970s, there was a pretty dominant narrative in the research that locally elected boards were bad for education. Because they turn over all the time, they get pushed by politics, they cause discontinuity. And there's a pretty strong body of science that shows that continuity in school leadership is good for student outcomes. But in the late 1990s, early 2000s, Mary Delgardelle was a PhD candidate with Tom Alsbury out at Iowa State. And they did a project where they asked, if we apply training to governing boards for schools, will they change their practices and behavior? Does that have an impact on student outcomes? And so they developed this it was like, I think it was 24 hours of training. Can you imagine adding 24 hours of training to your, it's an amazing. Anyway, really strong dose of training. And sure enough, in Iowa, they found an uptake in student achievement. They replicated it in Montana and Texas, found the same result. Eventually, finally found its way to Oregon, and that was the lighthouse inquiries. And it was like this, it kind of touched off this whole area of research around how we show up and do our work, how that impacts students. Now, I mean, the whole point of the slide is to tell you that what I'm sharing with you is not, what Vince Adams, thinks you should be doing. It's what the education science tells us that we should be doing. Okay? So when I come back, I'll get it updated with some more articles because there's people that are doing additional work. I want to talk about leadership team because I use this term and I want you to understand what I'm talking about when I talk about the leadership team. So leadership team, I mean, the board fundamentally, provides the authority. Where do you get your authority?
From the elect.
Constitution.
Well, from the legislature. If we go back, it's chapter 141, ORS 141, that chapter. That's what gives you the authority to govern the college. Okay. So you have that authority. You provide direction and oversight. So where's the college going to go and tracking its progress towards that? You have a president.
These charts, I find these charts funny, but yeah, I just how they like intersect and stuff. So yeah. I know I see where you're going with this. So yeah,
Awesome.
I like it.
Good.
Yep.
So yeah, the president provides leadership expertise. She's the education professional in the room, right? Okay. And you also have an administrative professional. And this is a person that often gets forgotten when we think about governance. But your administrative professional is crucially important because they're the grease that makes it all happen. They provide coordination. They also give you compliance. Often it's the board secretary who's the parliamentarian for the board. They often know where the bodies are hidden. They might have even put a few of them there. Okay. So, I mean, this is often, boards come and go, presidents come and go, but it's often the administrative professional that has long tenure and has that institutional memory. And that's why I have that continuity there. So 3 components to the leadership team leading this organization. Okay. So board and president, that's overall district leadership. You guys are steering the ship. Okay. Of course, board and administrative professionals, she's the one that's making sure that you're doing all the things, getting the information you need ahead of time so that you can come to the meeting prepared to make hard decisions, right? And then she's also the executive assistant. And I think you have you have 2 executive assistants or?
I do, but Celia is the board professional.
Yeah. So she's providing that support of executive functions as well. So really a critical person. At the center here, this is overall leadership efficacy. It's a 3-legged stool. Okay. And if one of these is weak, then you can see where leadership efficacy can start to fall off. Okay. So when I use the term leadership team, this is what I'm talking about. Did that line up with your?
Absolutely. I also see that center line is center section there is collaboration, right?
Yeah.
No, it is actual like collaboration. And that happens like when we set the board agenda, the chair and the vice chair meet together and they collaborate on creating the agenda for the board. And actually administrative professionals are also in that meeting and helping create the situation, given the information that we need and so forth. So that collaborative effort there is where some great work is done.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Any other reactions? Comments?
I always knew this was special.
They are. One of the hardest jobs there is. I mean,
We all know when we work at community college, get along with your department secretary, okay, or your life is not going to be the same. Yeah, that's the key.
2 hardest jobs. The person on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, they have the purple vest and they do this thing and the plane goes over their head. That's one of them. That's the other one.
Yes.
Okay. So high performing boards, what is it that the research says that we're supposed to be doing? And I want to draw your attention to the left-hand side here. So the first thing, our top most important thing that we do is setting a vision goals for what's possible in our district. or our organization. We set clear expectations, set a vision of what's possible, and setting a vision of high expectations. That conversation, that really squishy, difficult conversation around graduation rate, but it wasn't rate, how many people, that's about having a vision of high expectations that we are going to meet the needs of every person that enrolls at Lane Community College or die trying. We're going to do the very best we can, right? Climate and resources is really about building that culture that we were talking about, building conditions for success. Board work, Austin, you kind of activated this reference frame that, board work is kind of like tree farming. Tree farmers, anybody know a tree farmer? They don't think, they're an interesting group of people because they don't think in years.
Yeah.
They don't even think in decades. They think in generations. I'm planting trees today that my grandchildren will harvest. And board work is kind of like that. We're building conditions today.
Christmas tree farmers.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the timber cycles are a lot shorter than they used to be.
Oh my gosh. But the point is,
That's not your rotation, but yeah. But you're doing work today that some of you aren't even going to be in office when they bear fruit. Okay. So we have to think in long term, building conditions for success, creating a sense of urgency, and aligning and sustaining resources to that vision and goals that you've established. The president talked about data and monitoring and a desire to have the board be more data savvy. The reality is that, 15 years ago it was probably acceptable that we weren't looking at disaggregated data. Today, it's an accepted norm. If you're going to do equity work, you got to be looking at disaggregated data. So you need to be tracking your institution's progress using data and disaggregated data. Cohesive teaming is what the team is doing right now, learning together. Of course, practicing unified governance and a shared belief in what's possible for your students. Community engagement, this is roundly a role of the board. Not only are you beholden to the electorate, but you are also the president's eyes and ears in the community. You are the college's ambassadors in the community. So it's really important that you're out there building that public will to succeed, engaging community, and building that collaborative relationship with your partners, bringing them in so that they can support the success of the institution. And then the last one is policy and accountability, because policy is how we operationalize our governance. You meet twice a month. And in the intervening 14 days, the president needs to know what you expect from her. That's in policy. Okay. So high performing boards, just to roll up here. So we want to be focusing on vision goals, creating those conditions for success, tracking our progress, working together as a team, building that stakeholder engagement and will to succeed, and then operationalizing our governance through policy. Now let's flip the coin because there's research on the other side. Okay. Low performing boards. And every board has a little bit of this, but I mean, starting at the left, less time spent on student needs. You guys kind of confessed to this already. Sounds like you've spent a lot of time talking about more operational things when you might need to spend more time thinking about your students. So unsurprisingly, boards that spend more time focusing on the needs of students tend to have higher student outcomes. So, and I mean, it's literally grad students with stopwatches watching videos of boards and their work. When you're talking about your students, you're on the clock. And when you're not talking about students, they take you off the clock. So you want to spend the preponderance of your time talking about your students. If you do that, you'll probably have better outcomes. Anecdotes and agendas. So, I mean, and I want to differentiate this. We all come with our personal passions to this work. I mean, when I was elected, I told you I was in a sustainability event. I was elected to the school board to advance a sustainability agenda. And it was and still is a passion of mine. Okay. And I did. I mean, there was a number of things that I did in the 10 years that I was on that, but it was not to the exclusion of all else. Okay. So we have our passion, but we need to be showing up for all our students, all our staff, for our whole organization. And that we're relying on data, information from the institution, not our own personal experience. So say, for instance, my daughter comes to Lane Community College and I'm on the board. I'm making decisions based on what my daughter's experience. That's not appropriate. We're at the systems level. So we don't want to advance our own agenda. We want to advance an agenda that supports the whole institution. Core relationships. This is just, this is the basics. Don't throw binders at each other. Don't throw binders at, people in the audience, things like that. But be respectful. I think, Zach, you talked about culture and having respectful relationships and being attentive and hearing people. Just cultivating good relationships. And when we think about relationships, I want you to think in 3 channels. Within the board, between the board directors, okay, between the board and the president, and between the board and community, okay? Micromanaging, so we'll talk about balanced governance, but micromanagement is often a perennial problem. It's something that we want to avoid. We'll talk in a little more detail how to think about that. And then this last one is making excuses. The reality is that if you haven't already figured it out, no one's coming to save us. There's a fixed amount of pie. There's probably not going to be much more revenue. There'll be a little bit more revenue this year, but probably not a lot. The conditions aren't probably going to get markedly better. So we have to find success somehow with what the resources and what we've got here in the room. And there's lots of excuses. I mean, unions, we like to blame the unions. Oh gosh, have you seen the unions? Man, Portland Public Schools, they just went on strike. Man, if we rein in the teachers union, then we'll have resources for student success. Or students, half of them leave after the first year. How are we going to get them across the finish line if they don't even show up? They don't care. Any number of things. In K-12, sometimes it's blaming families or it's those kids. Probably not this, you were here in Eugene, but if I went over to Eastern Oregon, they're like, well, we're in Eastern Oregon, we're a smaller college. We don't have the resources to provide the programming to really create success. I have had school boards in rural communities give me that excuse, saying, oh, we're out here and we're small and we just don't have resources to really, what would you expect? They're letting themselves off the hook. The reality is that pretty much every community in Oregon has internet connectivity. If you want to talk to astronauts on the International Space Station, call them up. They're there, no matter where you are in Oregon. Okay, so I mean, there's no excuses. And ultimately, if we let ourselves off the hook, then we can. Now, here's the punchline. In 2014, I sat in retreat. So when the work that I did for OSU Extension, I did social demography. I ran a program called the Rural Communities Explorer, where we provided demographic, social, and economic indicators. And we worked with local government folks and nonprofit folks to do strategic planning. But I sat with my own school board and I said these words: we need to be mindful of the socioeconomic status of the students that are coming to us. I was the board member who made an excuse for my own board and let them off the hook. The reality is, particularly in K-12 education, we don't get an excuse. It's 100% or nothing. We're always aiming at each and every kid. Each and every kid should have a fair shot at coming to this school or its analog, wherever it is in Oregon. Okay? So we don't get to make excuses. All right, low performing board. So yeah, here's the summary slide. Core relationships, remember those, what were the channels? Do you remember relationships? When we think about relationships, we're thinking about with the president, that's one of them.
Community
With
and among each other.
amongst each other, good. Spend more time thinking about your students. Pretty easy. Anecdotes and agendas, we're not coming with our personal agenda. We're thinking about the whole institution, how we're serving our folks. We're not going to micromanage the president. We're going to empower her to do her job. And we're not going to make excuses. That means we're going to hold ourselves and the president and everybody else accountable for success, right? To achieve our goals.
These are actually really nice agreements right there.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Would you go back to the high performing slide for a moment?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. You want that one? You want detail? You want the summary?
This one here, yeah.
Would you go back to I think it's the previous one,
You want detail? Yep.
this one here. So this, wait a minute. Yeah, right. So this is what, three different organizations, whoever they are, weighing in on these items, right?
Yeah, and I can get more if you want.
No, I mean, they're largely saying similar things. So they're, which is great, right? They're supporting each other. I had a comment or observation. I would have expected to see something about, support the president or whatever. It's like part of the, the secret sauce or whatever of high performing boards. And it's not there directly and explicitly that I can see in any of those statements in any of those areas. I was surprised. I thought about
Yeah, it's not pulled out directly. I would say that lives in cohesive teaming would be my guess.
My observation after thinking about it for a minute or two, because it's like, wow, I think of it as a big part of our job. And support doesn't mean do what what makes life easy for the president. That's not what support means, right? But in any case, I look at all this like, well, if we're doing these things, it strengthens the president's hand to act on our behalf.
Exactly. All right. Which is the next piece here. So I want you to think about your college, visualize it as a cruise ship.
No,
I have another analogy. Hang on with me.
please. I hate cruise ships.
Okay. It's a fishing boat.
It
It's
is a sailboat
Go on.
that has no sails.
Okay. It's a ship. Let's just call it a ship.
Okay.
So, but the president in charge or the captain is in charge of navigation, engineering, the housekeeping, everything from, food service, from the cafe in the bow to the big restaurant amidships to the disco deck on the stern, has to staff it all. She's in charge of all of this. Bonus points if you get her a captain hat, and I get to see it when you do. Okay. She's the captain of the ship, right? School board, you commission the journey. You say, President Bolger, Captain Bolger, take us to the island of student success paradise, where each and every student at Lane Community Colleges gets the education that they need, that they want. So you're setting the destination of where you're going, and you're going to prove those ports of call, those little pins. Those are intermediate goals along the way. And at all times, you're going to rely on your maritime professional, because anybody in here knows how to run a ship.
Oh, yeah. Sailboat specifically.
Okay, but not a cruise ship, right? Okay, so we're going to rely on our maritime professional, right? Because there's some technical stuff, even with the sailboat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, see? So you want someone who's experienced. There's no expectation sitting on a board of education that you have expertise in administration, or in this case, adult education, or even board governance. All you have to do is draw breath and be an elector in the district, and you can be on the board. Okay. I had another point that I was going to make. Okay, here's another way. Yeah, go for it.
Well, Vince, have you ever seen, following your ship metaphor, have you ever seen a board that says, here, take it, President, take us to the island of student success. We can't really afford a compass, so we're going to give you a sextant, or kind of head that way. We don't have enough fuel for you to get there, but we know you're going to figure it out, and, on and on and on. So they give the president a goal, but yet don't give the president the tools to succeed. Or worse yet, midway in the voyage, then they, punch a hole in the side of the ship or whatever.
I've seen things like that. I've seen, of course, there's a board that's like, we want to go this way. No, now we want to go this way. So yeah, yes, we want to be consistent in our expectations. That's why we have strategic documents. We'll talk more. Well, we're not going to get to talk about more about that. We're going to do operating agreement. Okay, here's another way to think about this. When was the last time you climbed up in the cockpit and told the pilot how to fly the plane?
There was only one time.
There was only one time.
One of those little wings.
They didn't let me up there again.
Now, I wish this analogy, I could claim this analogy is original to me, but it's not. No, but it really does hold because I mean, we do have expectations when we get on the plane, right? We bought a ticket. We actually probably paid handsomely. I'm going to get on a plane next month and I fully expect it to take me to Mexico. Okay. I want to go to Cabo San Lucas. I want to be on a beach, warm water, warm sun. I need this. Okay. So I have this expectation when I get on the plane. Now, if I end up in somewhere else, I'm not going to be a happy camper. So I have an expectation. I have a destination I want to be. Now, I know you probably all have done this or had the impulse. When you know how the pilot stands and we've landed and they stand there. Have any of you said like, hey, nice landing, if it was a nice landing, or if you were coming down in a thunderstorm and you came in sideways like that and you're like, thank you for getting us on the ground alive. Yeah. And I mean, you also every time say thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you're evaluating their performance, right? We also track progress. Now, I mean, now they've got these cool data dashboards in the back of the seat with like it shows your trip progress and altitude and cruise, your flight time and all that stuff. So it's the same concept, only with your board, you have a destination of where you want to go. So you have some terminal measure of success, right? You have these intermediate goals and you have tracking metrics to see if you're getting there. It's not that an alien concept, right? But we're not climbing up in the cockpit and saying, no, you need to slow it down. We need to speed up. You're at the wrong cruising altitude. We don't do that because we have a trained professional to do that for us. And we set the expectation that we're going to get there safely. Yeah.
Yeah, but the board is not the passengers. The board is the aircraft controllers that are giving the destination when should we take off, timelines. The board is not the passenger.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, you could think about it that way. Or is the cabinet? I mean,
Yeah, but no, I appreciate the analogy though, in that there is expertise, complications, responses to those complications and so forth that we entrust to the pilots.
Sure.
100%. But yeah, I just don't think that we're the passengers. That's all I want to say.
Maybe our students are the passengers.
But you had a bunch to say about not being a passenger. I mean, so there's a distinction. So we're either doing the governance slide. Could you go back to the governance slide without the pilot analogy?
Which one?
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, God, I hate metaphors because I got to get caught in them.
Yeah. And please don't get hung up in this metaphor.
Totally. And I didn't mean to go down that path. But
Yep.
in regards to the pilot aspect, though, is that, yes, with pilots, you have to trust their judgment. There's going to be emergencies that happen, and their expertise in the subject matter is to be trusted.
Right.
So, yeah, 100%.
But so I just want to get some clarity because there's a little bit difference between we're going to trust the judgment of the president and or we've said, here's the journey, here's the strategic plan, here's the approved budget, here's the destinations and the strategic plan, and then we hand it off, and get out of her way to a certain degree while we're then getting reports back to see where the status is on each of those goals. Your comment is, well, we just trust their judgment, but we're not just sitting idly by as passengers. Somehow we're involved in all of that process. I just want to get some distinctions because that's what I'm hearing from you, that there's more to what you just said than, hey, that's just the analogy.
Well, what I'm saying is, there is a subject matter expertise, but if a ship or a plane is going to Ireland rather than Iceland, which, obviously we're the ones setting the destination for that pilot, I'm going to ask as a, flight control person, as the governance body. Why are we going to Ireland?
And I think, I mean, we're getting into the weeds on these
Sorry.
analogies, but I mean, you talked about a lot of different areas of oversight that a board has and that passengers on the plane do not have.
Mhm.
But there's regulatory agencies, there's air traffic controllers, there's lots of things that are regulating both maritime and aviation. So, I mean, we're getting too much in the weeds. We're getting too much.
Well, let's see.
We're FAA. I'm just kidding.
So I want to
Oh
finish
my
up
God,
this
that was
section
like
because I want to
last
move on to operating agreement because that's a lot more fun. But so you do have a big job. Governance is a big job. Now, I mean, this is another analogy, another illustration, but in the levers correspond roughly to impact on students. So, I mean, the first and foremost thing, the most important thing that you do is hire and evaluate the president. It is the single most powerful thing that you could do to impact your students. Because, I mean, it's a volunteer board. You're here twice a month. The president's here probably more than she probably would admit. Okay. Next is developing and adopting policy because we're operationalizing our governance through policy. Because we're not here, but she is. Her staff is here. And I know when a question comes up, that's the first place that she looks. Next is tracking progress. And this is a really important one. There's some real, my colleague, Krista Miles, has done some research around transformational leadership and executive education executives and this tracking progress, using data to track progress, and that the conversations that happen when a board and an executive talk about the progress of the institution really empowers the executive in their leadership. So this is actually, I could probably move that over, but it's an important component here. The other one is approving a budget. Reality is that we're really resource constrained. You have a little more flexibility probably in because you can charge tuition and have some control over that. In K-12, we're kind of on rails when it comes to resources. So it's a fairly small one. And then this last one is ministerial functions. This is the toilet paper contract. You know, you don't want to get hung up in ministry. I'm being hyperbolic. That was silly. You know, it's not literally that, but I mean, getting caught up in the minutia of the operations of the organization. Now, you are the contract authority for the college, I'm assuming. I don't know that for certain, but over a certain amount. And under that threshold, you've delegated that to the president. You know, so there are contracts that you approve. There are some ministerial things that you do have to do for the operation of the institution. But in the back of your mind, and this is, I'm talking to board leadership now, as you're building the agenda, again, returning to that concept of how much time are we talking about the needs of our students and their success versus ministerial stuff. That does mean that, I mean, there's just required things that you have to take up, and that's just the way it is. Get on those, get it, you know, do your due diligence and then move on. Don't pick at them too long because you want to be pulling on those bigger levers. Spending time, and you're going to spend some significant time talking about the evaluation of your president and how she's done this year and celebrating the success of her work. You should be spending a significant amount of your time talking about policy. You're doing, I understand that you're doing a merge of policies. You're 3 digits into 4 digits. I spent some time the last couple of days looking at your policies. Yeah, and then tracking progress. Those are the big levers, guys. Okay.
Could I add one more, Vince?
Yeah.
It's about really sort of overseeing the risk that there might be to the institution. We're talking, say, cybersecurity risks, or we're talking about any other kinds of risks that might be occurring in the environment.
Sure.
Being attuned to risk.
Okay. This is a laundry list of functions. Yeah. So really, you know, board, you're hiring the president, you're the contract authority, you're setting that vision destination, you're adopting the policy, kind of at the end of the process, are adopting policy. You're setting the budget, but you know, your president and her team is going to roll up all those expenditures. You're monitoring progress and they're reporting. So a clear divide between operations and governance. It's really the point here. Okay.
There's like an oversight that, you know, or like I don't know if judicial, it's not exactly the right word. It's the word that's coming to mind. I don't think it's the best word.
You're talking about informed oversight? That's here.
No, in terms of I mean, I guess I'm saying this out loud because I'm curious to hear if people feel like I'm off base, but we also we meet, you know, twice a month. Once a month, anyways. We have public comment, and often that public comment, people can say whatever they want, but frequently it's, you know, people are raising concerns that they have, criticisms, whatever it is, and I think so we get that feedback, and we have it's like a I don't know, it's like a quasi judicial function, you know, and I feel like our role there is like are these complaints, concerns, criticisms, that's not all that we hear, but I'm talking about those things right now, are to what extent are they revealing that we are not following or that our staff, our president, whatever, are not following the policies and guide and, you know, rules and regulations, whatever that we've set forth. Our job is, as far as, you know, getting involved in those things, I feel like that is, I'm not saying this as well as I wished I could have, but that we have that function too. It's not so much to say the outcome should be A or B or C, but it's that are we, you know, we serve as a, I don't know, as a kind of a last resort for folks to, you know, appeal whatever their concern is. Our job is, I think, mostly not just is to say, well, have our policies, you know, been followed?
Yeah.
What I take from what you're saying, Steve, is that where are the critical thinking type questions and that we should be, and equity lens type questions that we should be asking once we hear a lot of information? So we hear the information and it raises questions. And I see it that that's an appropriate role for us to turn around and ask questions about the status or the progress or the situation or more information, or how is this affecting faculty, staff, students, whatever. Because we want clarity. And it's okay to ask clarity because, as you just pointed out, some people feel that as they've come to speak in front of the board is as a last resort, and they really want to be listened to. Right? And the evidence of being listened to is by turning around and asking, clarifying questions, information, gathering information, understanding better. Because we don't respond to any public comment. That's not our role.
Correct.
I mean, I think what you're getting at falls under that ministerial role category where you're sort of a figurehead. You know, the speaking at a public event, doing community outreach, sitting and listening to public comment. It's just sort of comes with the role in terms of listening. That's sort of just the listening.
So
I'm going off on a tangent.
I'm going to take a trainer moment and step in. So yes and no. If someone is coming with a legitimate complaint about operations of the district, or the district, I'm sorry, the college, if it's operational in nature, well, I mean, the board may be hearing that in comment, the reaction of the chair should be to turn to the president and say, can you follow up on this? Because ultimately, as a board, you have no operational capacity, right? You can't fix the problem. So, but your president can. Now
That's our
I've
board.
heard of some boards that when they've heard those things, that in a subsequent meeting, there's a follow-up from the president. Really nice gesture saying, last month we heard from this person. We followed up with that. That issue has been resolved. They don't go into any more detail because you can't. And so, but it's a nice feedback loop, A, for the board, and B, for community to know that, yes, indeed, president and cabinet are following up. Yeah.
Just another way to put it is has the issue been addressed?
Yeah.
We have board policy. We can't respond to a board comment as it's happening. But yes, we should go to the president to go, hey, this is the defined issue for
Right.
public comment, and then follow up with, has that issue been resolved?
Right.
Or what's the timeline for that issue?
Yeah.
Or do you got more information to better define that issue? I think that's a perfectly acceptable way for a board to operate.
Yeah, I mean, if you can work that in, I don't know of many boards. I know of one that does that. My own doesn't even do that. So, I mean, if you could weave that in, really nice.
That is our existing board policy to not respond and to defer
Right.
the issue to the president.
Perfect.
One of the ways that we have a feedback loop is the responses to information requests. So it's not necessarily done publicly in a meeting,
Mhm.
but we do have those responses to information requests as part of the
I'm gonna
feedback loop.
pop out of here and I'm going to jump forward. We're going to skip over that. We're going to skip over that. Again, we're going to talk about complaints because we're on the topic here. So when does the board hear complaints?
Public comment.
No, I'm talking about formal complaints. Yeah, people, okay, let's differentiate. People complain all the time. I mean, that's just part of board work. It's the air we breathe. People are often bringing issues to our attention. And that's just, but we're talking about real actionable stuff, something where there was probably a violation of policy or statute, or someone's needs aren't being met, whatever it is. So when I say complaint here, I'm talking about a formal complaint. When does the board hear formal complaints?
Well, quite frankly, if we're gonna know that there's been a legal, won't call it complaint, but a legal,
Action.
no, not even action, sorry. ULP or, filing of some kind. It's interesting because we don't usually hear about it, do I want to say up front? We don't usually, it's not like a status report that, let's say, comes every couple of weeks or once a month to say, currently, there are so many, not complaints, but there's so many, gosh, what's the word I'm looking for?
You're talking about grievances?
Yeah, grievances that are, that have been filed on level 1 or level 2 or level 3.
Right.
I mean, it's not really, level 1 is just, you got to sit down and talk about it. But when it gets to level 3 and 4 and this and that, and so we don't get quote unquote a report about that. Now, if we have classified staff or union leadership presenting those in their written report or in their comments, then if we ask questions about where is that at, or may we have some more information about that, or we'd like to know when a decision has been made on that, then we get that information. But you see what I'm saying as far as
So-
the way it flows,
So
the
there's two-
information flows?
Hold on, Steve. There's two pathways there. You're talking about labor complaints, and that's going to go through the grievance pathway. That's part of your collective bargaining agreements with your associations. So that's one pathway. I'm talking about, say, a student bringing a complaint that, like, say, Professor Adams talked me in the nose. That would be.
We don't hear that.
So that's the system working as intended. That doesn't mean that complaints aren't happening.
Right.
Sure, they are. But the fact that you don't hear them means that the president and her team are addressing them and they never have to come to you
Oh, agreed.
because you're the appellate body, right?
But we have had presentations of people, employees, faculty, um, filing and feeling unsafe.
Mm.
And, you know, that's something to pay attention to,
Sure.
or feeling, using the words and feeling harassed. And so that's something to ask questions about, because if a student came to public comment and made statements that they felt unsafe or they felt harassed, we certainly would have questions that we would want to follow up on, right? So to me, it's this, you know, kind of the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's ways to track that. I mean, you could do climate surveys and things like that to track how people are gonna feel as they're going through the grievance process. It sounds like you're really focusing on that grievance side. So people are not feeling safe in the grievance pathway versus a student.
No, you know, if faculty are saying that they don't feel safe and they have gone through the processes available to them, or a staff member is saying they don't feel safe and they've gone through the pathways that they know are available to them through their collective bargaining agreements and everything like that. And then as a last resort to be heard on the issue, they then come to public comment, right? And bring it up in that forum, you know, then it's like, okay,
Yeah.
some questions arise as to what's the status, where are we at with this situation? Is it getting resolved?
So if an employee, again, the board would want to consult counsel, because you're kind of at that, in that territory. If that have that situation and you're going to put your toe in there, I mean, that really is a formal complaint territory. So then, you know, that individual would need to want, because if you're not fulfilling your collective bargaining agreement, then that's a violation of policy and possibly statute. So that employee should then file a formal complaint, and then it comes to the board. So here's the answer. That would be probably a complaint against the president, or maybe someone under the president, in which case the president would hear that. But if the process isn't supporting that person, then then that could come to the board. But there's a process for that. They shouldn't be coming to public comment to do that. There's a pathway to do that.
Right. Public comment tends to happen only after the pathway to do it has not been attended to. And in a level of why isn't it being attended to? Please listen, because this
So
hasn't been attended to.
before we go any further, I think to continue this conversation, because this is getting into performance of the president potentially, I would rather go into executive session and then I'd also want to grab an attorney to come alongside to support that conversation. Because to do that appropriately, to honor that employee, honor the board, the institution, and the president. Because I don't think the president wants anybody to feel like they're being harassed or to be afraid to raise an issue that's come up. That's not a way that we resolve problems. Yeah, Austin.
Just really quick, I was looking through board docs and policies. We actually don't have a formal process for a student to file a complaint to the board through board policies. And noted.
We have processes for students to file complaints within, and I think probably as Sophie is saying, so we have a process.
Please.
We have a process for students to file complaints. By and large, student complaints would not come to the board. We kind of take care of those.
The only reason he asked the question, a complaint to the board from a student. That was the question. I was just trying to answer. I mean, did I misunderstand the question?
Yeah, I mean, there should be some pathway if that complainant doesn't have resolution say you have the dean deal with it, and that's going to get
Mhm.
to you.
Mhm.
And if they're still not happy, where does that complaint go?
I would imagine our student code of conduct has that in it.
Yeah, you file a complaint to Carl Ye, the dean of student affairs.
That's right. And if it's not the dean, then it's probably the vice president. It can come up to me. It would get to me, I would say, Austin, before it ever gets to the board.
Absolutely.
When there was a question, which the question exactly is there a complaint to the board?
Yeah, I just
about
didn't
the-
understand the pathway.
Totally.
So, but I mean, there is a pathway for a student
Wonderful.
complaint to find its way to this board
Mhm.
because you would be the appellate body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So,
mean, I think the only one of these we've seen probably would be the second one since I've been on the board.
yeah.
Generally, if there's an issue, we might hear about it, but we don't really directly interact with it.
Mhm.
Maybe we'll ask the president about it. If it ends up at the point where there's an official action, ULP or otherwise, generally we've waited until it's resolved and then gotten the final report. We've waited. We haven't dug into the details while it's an ongoing
Yeah.
issue.
And right, so.
That's under litigation, that we basically have stayed out of it until it's resolved.
Yeah. So let's say if it's one of these situations, there's a complaint on appeal,
Mhm.
a complaint against the president, God forbid, or
Mhm.
complaint against one of you guys.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the only time you're going to be exercising your judicial capacity.
Yeah.
Okay. But I know people talk to you, right? Steve, you have a question? We're
Well-
into this.
Yeah, well, for one, the thing I said earlier about, I feel like I want to strike it, and I have something to say, but it's more nuanced, and I think I need time to really think through how to say it. So for the time being, I just want to strike that and say that didn't represent what I meant to say very well. But in any case, the question I have for you is that despite whatever sort of, best practices that you might recommend for, how what information comes to the board, when it comes to the board, who else it should go to first. I mean, we could come up with a best practice, structure for that.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, because we have public comment, anybody can, short circuit the whatever the process we have and just air their thing in 3 minutes in front of the board once a month. So I'm just curious what you have to say about that basic fact.
So as long as there's objective criticism of the college and its programs, that's fine. The board can't hear criticism of employees. Do you hear criticism about specific employees?
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys need to nip that because that's an that's HR and that's confidential. So that could violate the confidentiality. You can consult legal counsel. But my recommendation to you is that if you can, in the course of their testimony, and they're complaining about a specific employee, and you can figure it out, you should probably stop that speech.
To clarify, I think we've had people that have complained about situations,
Okay.
and they might put the onus for that situation on the president.
That's a different employee.
I don't think that we've had attacks on individual employees
Good.
in that way.
Good. Yeah, so that's a pretty hard line because it exposes the board to litigation. There's a risk there. Because the employee can come back and say, you allowed this person to talk badly about me, and that's an internal HR issue that I was dealing with my supervisor, and that's not appropriate. That would expose you to a potential risk. So try to avoid it. Okay.
Heard.
But if they're going to talk about, say, the welding program, I wasn't able to be, I don't know why. Think about the issues that come up. Then they can complain about programs and about the college in general.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And then, but if it's operational in nature, it doesn't pertain to the vision of the college, policy, budget, things like that. That's not board work. That's operational. And so the president needs to address that. Okay.
Mhm.
It's not too tough. Okay, but people talk to you and I'm losing my time here. So, but this is important because I know people talk to you. I mean, this is Oregon. There's only 4.5 million of us in the whole state. So people are talking to you. So let's talk about this. Conversations with students. If I was in a K-12 board, I'd be talking about conversations with parents, but you would be talking to your students. Okay. So someone comes to you with a problem. My needs aren't being met. I didn't get that class I wanted. I don't know what the conversations that you have with your students. The first thing you're going to want to do is if someone reaches out to you, you want to honor that conversation. I mean, because they're coming to you and they don't know another way to deal with it. Okay. Next ones, you want to avoid hearing details of the potential complaint because you sit on the appellate body. So the idea here is ex parte communication in legal terms. It's why we sequester juries. When the board hears complaints on a formal basis, you're acting like a jury. Okay. So you want to direct them to resources. You're going to direct them back to their prof, the teacher, whatever, dean, and whatever complaint policy. It sounds like you have some sort of something in your student manual. That you can, yeah. So
Can you expand on that point about us being the appellant body and when that might be the case?
So if a student had a complaint and it went through, it sounds like the dean of students found its way to the president, and if they still were not satisfied, I'm guessing that they can appeal that complaint to the board.
I don't know the policy. I'm assuming that that would be the case, but it would be, it's probably very well spelled out. So it's not a student coming in public comment and making a complaint. It would be something that would be very formal, probably written, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then the board would be able to see the trail of the process as well. So that's usually the way that we do it. It's very formal.
Yes. And I'm glad this is an alien concept because it means you've never gone through it before. And that's great. That's a good thing. So in this, you're going to direct them to resources. You can act in an ombudsman capacity and point them back towards the complaint pathway. So they're going to need to talk to the dean of the department or the dean of students. You know your internal structure better than I do. And then you need to let the president know, hey, I had this conversation with the student. This situation's going on. Something you might want to be aware of. Because while you don't have magic wands, even though the public thinks you do, the president does. She's got a whole staff of people that can get resources on this student and get them what they need. Ultimately, that's the whole point here, is to get student ready.
Could we replace student with community member?
Sure.
With employee, with,
Well,
okay.
let's raise the temperature on the conversation. What about conversations with staff? Don't tell me it doesn't happen. Happened to me all the time when I was on the board. Sure. You're at that barbecue and had a couple Chardonnays and now we're talking about work. So conversations with staff. So you could consider refusing the conversation. You're out of lane. They're not your employee, the president's employee. So you could just say, I'm sorry, I can't have this conversation with you, and refer them back. If you do choose to have this conversation, disclose that you will speak with the president. Why is that important?
Collaboration.
Huh?
Collaboration.
What about, tell me more about collaboration.
Totally, yeah. To inform the president of an issue and then have a collaborative conversation of what defining the issue and potentially even figuring out some solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also cultivating trust.
100%.
Yeah. So you're cultivating trust with your president by doing that. You're also cultivating trust with that employee because you're being completely clear about the situation. And it shifts the locus of control back to them. They can make the choice. Do I want to have this conversation with a board member, or do I just want to go and talk to my supervisor? Okay. So it gives them the choice. Honor the conversation just like you would. You have an employee that's out on a limb. You are too. Okay. So you're both going out on the limb. So honor that conversation. because they're going to be scared and they have something, they're escalated and they don't know the right way to handle it. Avoid hearing details of the potential complaint because it's probably going to come through the grievance pathway. You may hear it on appeal. Because you are in that pathway. And then direct them to resources. Again, did you talk to the dean? Or whatever, whoever their supervisor is. Yeah.
So I just wanted to look at that fourth bullet down there and then kind of relate it to something that I want to clarify with Austin about collaborating with the president about possible solutions. The fourth bullet suggests that you would not collaborate with the president on possible solutions.
Yeah, that's true. So
Well, I know I didn't create this list. but in regards to what it means to like direct them to resources, why is that in there?
direct them to resources.
Yeah.
Because you can direct them back to the collective bargaining agreement, the grievance
Oh, yeah.
process and all that. Those are all
Yeah.
resources.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah.
Supervisor, all that stuff.
Totally.
Yeah, you can,
Mhm.
you can say, these are the pathways that you can take.
100%.
That's what that is.
I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about the part where it's like disclose that you will speak with the president, that they're about to tell you something. You don't want to hear the details. You're just going to report out to the president that this employee reached out to me about this issue. I don't know all the details, but I'm just letting you know they did.
Yep.
I, as a board member, cannot have a conversation, a collaborative conversation with the president about how they're going to address this matter at all. That's not in our purview. It's not before us. And if you did do that, then you'd have to recuse yourself if this ever came to the board, because you now know the details. You've now been part of the details and part of the solution. Our job is not at all to be involved with staff. They are not our employees. And that is especially true for faculty, for administrative staff, the whole bit. They're not our employees.
Absolutely. I don't know if I can respond.
Sure. Yeah.
There are constituents and their stakeholders. And that's where the collaborative conversation with the president comes in.
Well, then, I mean,
Yeah.
you do that handoff and say, hey, I had this.
100%.
And that's the
100%.
collaborative component.
That is absolutely is. Yeah.
But I mean, you're not going to be part of the solution because as an individual board member, you only have authority when you're gaveled into a meeting. Otherwise, we don't have any authorities. Have a good day. Have a good night. So,
Sorry. Yeah.
okay.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
I think obviously we want to be able to listen when people are coming to us, but it seems like there's some situations where we might want to say we can't have this conversation. In this piece about disclosing that you will speak with the president, I think it makes sense. But I did want to ask about the potential hypothetical if someone says, I'm scared of the president. I'm uncomfortable with this conversation being shared with the president. Hypothetically, if that situation were to happen, where do you direct someone to if they don't have, if they're concerned and don't have a trust?
I don't know.
I
Well,
think,
yeah.
can I say, it's a perfect opportunity to say, if you are a member of a collective bargaining unit that has a contract, you go directly to your grievance chair or your president, because they're paying dues. And almost every single faculty and staff person on this campus is a member of a collective bargaining unit that has very specific grievance procedures. So that is the person who they're paying dues to an organization that has a person and backup people to listen and direct and process practically anything that could come up. And they're the ones that should do it.
And I mean, that's what they should have done in the first place. They
Yeah.
shouldn't be coming to the board member. They should be going through their union representation. So that
Again, this is a hypothetical.
because it's like, I mean, there's nothing for you to do.
It's a good question. I think it's also a really good answer.
Yeah.
They shouldn't, people feel what they feel. They can say that they feel fear, but but they have union representation, which gives them a lot of protection to air their concerns. So
Through process, which
Yeah.
was really great too. I just want to make sure that we say again that the collaboration really is about disclosing that you'll speak to the president, because
Yeah,
that's where the
that's the last
collaboration
bullet point
occurs.
Mhm.
Yeah, follow up with the president, because that's where the collaboration occurs. You're like, oh, great. Thank you so much for letting me know. I need to know those kinds of things. I need to know what's happening in the college. That's what the collaboration is all about.
Yeah,
I'm totally agreeing.
ultimately. And that was my check-in to make sure that you're comfortable. Because sometimes this can make chief executives uncomfortable, because I'm basically creating a framework for board members to go around your back, which is not where you're supposed to be. This is out of lane. Okay. So try to avoid this if you can. But if you get in this situation, just because of the nature, in Austin, you've been really tapping on this, that in Oregon, we have a culture where we feel we have access to our elected officials. And so it's hard to say no.
Mhm.
It is really hard to say no. I've done this maneuver a number of times.
Mhm.
And thankfully, I didn't break trust with my superintendent doing it.
And I certainly know that board members have relationships. This is a small community.
Yeah.
So board members have relationships with people, friendships with people. So I do know that.
Another thing you can ask is when someone starts chewing on your ear, it's like, are you just blowing off steam or is this real?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if they're like, I'm just blowing off steam,
Mhm.
then it can go in one ear and out the other.
Mhm.
But yeah.
100%.
Well, totally appreciate that we are as electeds, and we get people reach out all the time. I got emails and, text messages and stuff like that. But I also have the role and my responsibilities as a board member that's actually kind of separate from
Mhm.
the conversation that took place.
Yeah.
It's like that could inform me, that might help me make decisions. I might have me ask questions, but my involvement in the conversation of how it's going to change or what the president's going to do or anything else has a wall as soon as I sit behind this dais, as soon as I sit here as the elected. And I think that's the thing that I want to make sure that when we all walk away from this meeting today, is that we're all on the same page about that yes, we have constituencies, yes, we have people there, but when we walk in the door after we've had all those conversations, we have to be then responsible on the other side of this table here for the board governance, for the institution and what we all do as a collective body, not to forward this as the only thing and to take these conversations out into those public settings. Like there's stuff that has to be done here and I don't know. I'm just.
That's it. Okay, let's see. No, don't answer that. I'm gonna jump forward. I only have 45 more minutes with you, so I have to move quickly now. We don't get to go over any of that stuff. It's gonna have to come.
Cruise ships.
No more cruise ships. No, that's a fishing boat up there.
Oh, there's a fishing boat.
There it is.
I really
fishing
wanted
boat.
to hear what happened to the airplane, but
Oh, there's.
oh, look, there's rowing. Hey, look, there's
Hey,
rowing.
I grew up on the coast.
Yeah, way to go.
I like that one.
Okay. Operating agreements.
All right.
Austin, what's an operating agreement? You're the resident expert.
Oh, I'm a resident. Wow, that is a title undeserving.
No, you said that you have one. Were you around when they created it?
No, I wasn't. It came before the board. Yeah, exactly.
Appropriately.
You did, really.
Thank you.
So operating agreements, operating agreements are, it's just a document that we use as a board to draw our attention to things we want to cultivate and things that we want to adjust. So what are those things about this board that work really well? Is there things that you do that are awesome? You want to retain that. You want to retain that as part of your culture and send it to the board of the future, right?
Mhm.
And then there are things that we're all human. We have things that we're working on, right? So what are those things? And the document holds that at front of mind. Who are they for? They're for the board members themselves here. Thank you. Sorry, I was multitasking so much. I was distracted.
Totally, yeah.
Okay. And why do we have them? Because to help us organize our work together as we're doing our work. Because sometimes we make mistakes. We don't do things the way we want to. And so we have to correct or cultivate those things. And when do we use them? Well, you should be using it at every meeting. So you asked, how do we incorporate it into our work? Laminate that document and put it on the desk and have it with you at every meeting. It's probably the best recommendation I have. So it's there, front and center. Some boards will have some elements of their operating agreement that they'll actually recite at the beginning of the meeting, like you do your land acknowledgement. Some have equity statements. Some say, we commit to centering students in all decisions or something like that. Okay. So those are other ways to incorporate them. So how to use them. So this is a formative process. So I'm going to try and pull information out of you is what I'm going to do. So you're going to get a series of questions. You're going to respond to them. And then we're going to put it on this chart that's been blocking our view the whole evening. And I'm going to collect that information. And then what I'll do is I will draft up an operating agreement using your original as part of the feedstock. That'll go into that as well and roll that all together. And then I will bring it back or send it back to you. And you can decide whether you want me to go through it with you or you can do it on your own, but we can deal with that down the road. So with 43 minutes remaining, I want you to imagine the perfect board meeting. So what is it like? And what is the board working on and how do members interact? Now, you have Post-its. You've already named 3 things. You're an overachiever. I want you to come up with 3 things. So you have to prioritize. What are those top 3 things in your perfect board meeting? Okay. So kind of only 5 minutes, 3 minutes. Because I want to make time. Okay. Perfect board meeting. Stephanie, you're part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm setting a time. I'm going to do 4 minutes.
Again, what is a perfect board meeting?
In your mind.
Yep.
This is totally your own conception. What is your perfect meeting? Your mind's eye.
Yeah.
Oh, I need them on separate things.
Each question or every answer?
Each idea. Sorry, I gotta kill some trees. I'm sorry. I should put the instructions on. This is why I have a PowerPoint. So the instructions, I should put the instructions on the screen.
Your slides are magnificent.
We didn't even get to the whole breakwater analogy and all that.
Oh, no.
It was a great
That's where
I think that metaphors and
I enjoyed this.
I think a
when it
metaphor.
comes to the coast, you can do breakwaters. So.
I think metaphors and analogies should follow the rule of fonts in presentations. Not more than 2 or 3 different fonts in any presentation material. And I think analogies and metaphors should follow that rule, because you cannot have a whole bunch of them. You start to get really lost in the
What about similes?
similes.
Similes.
Okay, so do I get rid of the cruise ship or the airplane?
Cruise ship.
Yeah,
lose the cruise ship,
Yeah, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Can you say norovirus?
I like the cruise ship because it has operational pieces to it that are very clearly to understand. Whereas the plane's cockpit is driven by a single person and it doesn't really talk about the rest of the plane. If it was sitting on the tarmac, and you showed all the people around it and loading the food and all of that, then the plane analogy might work.
Canoe, you have different operational people.
You only get 3.
Or a sailboat.
Oh,
Yeah,
cruise ships also have facilities
Oh, I only
too,
get
so
three?
that is also an additional benefit. Ooh, oh, really? I only get 3? Dang it. Oh, okay. All right. This one I'll take out.
Hold on to it because you might get.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely use it later.
Bunch of questions, so you might be able to recycle.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely use it later.
If you have 3.
Yep, I do.
Ooh, keeping student success front of mind. Love it.
Everyone agrees with me. That's the other one.
Okay, everybody agrees with me.
I had that too.
Oh, thank you. Efficient.
Owl?
Yeah.
The barred owl.
It hoots?
Okay.
No way. What is it? What is it? Like, is there like a reason?
Understand, like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an error message or a
Let's see, what do you?
notification?
Personal. Oh yeah. That's definitely a great category for it.
No, you didn't. That was the owl. Yeah. Is there a reason why?
Yeah, awesome.
I think that was Vince's timer.
Oh.
Yeah, the.
The owl actually.
Use of time. Hey.
Wouldn't we strive for mutual agreement fall under that category too? Yeah, you think? Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Public Works
Awesome.
and the bat infestation. Luckily, they're going down.
We had a bat in the bathroom.
Okay.
There's one.
This one.
You know the best tennis racket.
Have cookies?
Just
Yeah.
I'm so cute.
well, he's inside for a reason.
We have a bat guy on campus.
Prioritize.
Did we say?
Ooh, we just.
1, 2, 3.
Awesome. Thank you. 1. Oh, yeah.
So 2, maybe start with 2 and then go to 1 and 3.
Approved new program. Oh, yeah. It's on the agenda. It's on the agenda. That's what's on the agenda. Big, well researched.
That'd be under efficiency stuff.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
That can fit there. Doesn't matter. It'll all fit.
Actually, they all blend together.
Okay. Program highlights. Yeah. KPIs. I like it. Ooh. Students, yeah. Program highlights.
Sorry, I changed you're missing my third. I changed it.
Big ideas. Oh. Those are the ideas. Can you tell I really like these processes? I love getting cool
Or
ideas.
you like sticky notes?
I like ideas when people come up with cool ideas.
I'll let you figure out which ones they go to.
Oh,
I just realized I didn't title them.
yeah. Yeah. Ooh, that is a. Just people, student success. That's what's on the agenda. Uh-oh. I'm gonna have to get tape out.
Yeah.
Agenda is follow time management.
I got
So
the,
efficiency has been a little bit of an issue. Okay.
Oh, you didn't take mine?
That's
It was about the.
that was an effective line at the end of that statement. That was well done.
Words. Options to reach agreement. Oh, this is mutual agreement right there. No bother bay. Timely, productive. That's efficiency. All of it. And then I'll get to this. Okay. Ready to go again? Okay, next one. What's working? So this is the part that we want to cultivate. You know, so how are you effective? How you guys are showing up, supports the work of the board. What about the organization that you want to keep? How you're organizing your meetings? And what about the content? So what do you want to cultivate and keep in meetings? What's working well? Okay, we start.
Separate pieces of paper.
Yes, 3 separate pieces of paper, your top ideas.
Need
Repeat-
to
See the-
grab something.
Repeat the question one more time.
So this is how are your meetings effective?
Okay.
That's the base one. It's really about how board members are showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's find all this. Okay. And then about how the meeting is organized.
Yeah.
And then about what's actually in the meeting, what's on the agenda.
Got it. Um,
Okay. Now, this is the other side, it's typical evaluation. What could be more potent? How could your meetings be more effective? So how does board behavior and practice inhibit efficacy? Could the meeting be better organized? What is the board not discussing that it should be discussing? What is the board discussing that could be set aside? Okay, so what's on your agendas that you can cut out so you can focus on students, right? Because it sounds like there was appetite for that.
Do you have any more of these, Mom? Oh,
Oh,
I have.
Yeah.
yeah,
Then I lose my anonymity.
it's okay. Are there processes that need to change? So anything that can make your meetings more effective. So yeah, what's the role of the board with regards to students? Regarding the president. You're on to the next one, the role of the board.
mhm.
You could probably guess what it is. Oh no, role of board leadership.
Board leadership.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we'll get to the president. Okay, that's right.
Well, it says, what should the president expect?
Yeah, so what's the role of board leader? So it's chair and vice chair. What should board members expect and what should the president expect? Okay, that's right. I'm putting the last ones up, so I need to advance you to the next one.
And this one
is the
name.
president. What's the role of the president? What should board members expect? And what should board leadership expect?
I wonder what the public document rules are for these sticky notes. I'm just
They are technically, you know, what's interesting is. So I take pictures of them. But they never ask for them.
Yeah.
That's-
Oh, the written notes? Yeah.
Yeah, these.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
never ask for them, which is really interesting. What else? What did we miss? Cookies.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like subject matters or?
Do not.
Just the cookies. So they're just cookies.
I never eat them.
Did we miss anything?
You mean from any of the areas?
On anything?
On
This is kind of
anything
the
at all.
This is the catch-all. Is there something that the board needs to work on or that you want to hang on to that needs to be in this document, that needs to be incorporated somehow? Yeah, any of those that you had at the beginning that didn't quite fit, that might still be in there, that can go here. Anything? Thank you.
This was great.
I don't know about you guys, but I have a really good time.
Absolutely.
Watching you work in this process. Yeah. Thank you for your candor and for your courage. I asked you hard questions and asked you to take risks and you guys did it. So thank you for that. Speaks to the characters where we pass. So, yeah, what's next? So I will pull all this together into statements. You we didn't really debrief these and look through them. We had more time, we could have gone through them, but there are themes, there are threads that run through all of them. And that's what I'll be lifting out into statements. I'll create a document that you guys can review. It is a draft. It will be my words, not yours. So I fully expect you to red pen the heck out of that document and make it yours. Okay. Yeah, so please revise. Your staff can do that. So you can give parameters on what changes you'd like to see, have them do the rewrite, or members of the board can do the rewrite and then bring it back to the board. Ultimately, the board needs to approve the operating agreement. And optimally, everybody votes in support of it. Okay. Yeah.
For consideration, in regards to revising agreements, if needed with staff, maybe the chair, the vice chair, and the president might consider the shared governance process, potentially, with the different committees and so forth. Just an idea. It could be, yeah, something to discuss.
I think that that's something the board should discuss how you want to revise. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
Sometimes in these activities, you get the outliers, so you're synthesizing, that's what it sounds like to me. And in that process, sometimes there are things that don't fit. Will your document maybe identify some points made on whatever topic that didn't necessarily theme in, but consider?
I can pull that. I mean, I can provide an analysis of the input. What are the themes that came up? What were the outlying, comments? Sure, I can do that. And then give you an actual writing agreement document. Sure, I can do that.
Just if you could read the existing operating board operating agreement.
That will be part of the.
Obviously, yep, perfect.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely use that as a jumping off point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we probably, just to respond to what Austin, thank you for that suggestion. I think we probably wouldn't take it to the governance, through the governance system of the college, because the board delegates to me the authority to run the college, and the governance system is one part of that, the college governance system. So we probably wouldn't do that.
Maybe some clarification. When you say revise agreements if needed by staff, what do you mean?
Meaning that board, you can bring it up, put it on an agenda, board members react to it. I like this phrase, I don't like this. Restrike this, add, change things, and then staff actually does the wordsmithing. There's nothing more painful than a school or a board trying to wordsmith in session.
We've done that.
Yeah, so that's painful,
Yeah, yeah.
even in small committees.
Totally, yeah. It's just, yeah. So as for instance, like this document up here, our values, strategic direction, vision, mission, core themes. This went through our shared governance process, which includes staff.
Sure.
I don't see why not with the board operating agreements.
I'm just saying, staff doing it offline. It's really helpful.
So yeah, through the shared governance, yeah, exactly, which is away from the board and
Or
process. Yeah.
or you could give it to one member and they can do that.
Can I say something on that? We know this conversation because we have been here. And anybody who hasn't been here in this conversation, the nuances, the questions, the everything, is unaware. So to me, getting to a draft document and us being able to look at it and make, suggestions and comments on it, maybe because we get it. My question is does that have to happen in a work session meeting, or can we do this on our own time and have deadlines? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, do we have any requirement whatsoever to revise or continue the discussion on this document in a work session?
It should be done publicly, if that's what you're asking.
The revision of it?
Mm-hmm. Unless it's a small group, a subset of the board, or you give it to me and Celia to do. We can talk to the board chair and the vice chair about it.
I thought, this is why I'm asking this question. I thought that we have a document. We got to the final document by some process or another. And it is that final document that is public that we vote on. But I thought the process of revision to get to the final document does not need to be in a work session. Am I wrong?
I appreciate your desire for efficiency.
Hmm.
I think this is a situation where inefficiency serves the board better, where you actually have the conversation in the meeting face to face. Or keeping it virtually, where you're gonna have reactions to the document that I create, and your colleagues should hear your comments and all.
Oh, I agree. I'm
Yeah.
trying to distinguish that between because when we have a work session, it's still a public session.
Yep,
So,
that could be in a business meeting or a work session.
okay, so that's the form. That's where it has to happen. It can't happen like I got a copy of the document and I'm looking at it and I'm giving my feedback and I'm looking at other people's feedback. We have to do it in session.
Yeah, the only way you could do that offline is if all the feedback came to one person and then they would have to synthesize it, but then you lose the benefit of the conversation.
Okay, I understand better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That can be in a work session or in a business meeting, it's up to you.
Try and wrap this up here if that's okay. So I just want to thank everyone for participating tonight. I think we're going to get a draft document that the vice chair and I will bring back to this group for discussion, and we will set next steps to finalize that document. And just thanks again. And if that's done, I will do our last two items here and we'll be out of here. Okay. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Please note that the next regular board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 5th at 6 p.m. And with that, our retreat is adjourned.
Marvelous.